Yeah, I don't get it either because there's some classic looking, gore and action right there at the beginning of the movie,
Yeah.
and it's we're talking. Hey, everybody! Welcome to Strange the World. My name is Kevin Strange, and I talk to people, mostly authors, mostly bizarro authors, and we talk about books and shit. The writing experience being an author in 2015, and what it's like, and what the good parts and the bad parts and the sexy parts and the Minotaur parts, right, MP Johnson?
It's 2015?
Yeah. Yeah, it's getting weird. I
Totally
was
weird.
I was at work the other night going, and I went off on this rant about artificial deficit and why corporate America has ruined the chances of us having flying cars and bullet trains and all the cool things that we should have in the future, because the corporations that exist today do everything they can to throttle us back and make maximize profits while minimizing innovation. And I'm afraid that this fucking world is going to look exactly like it does now in 2025, except our fucking phones will be even bigger.
Bigger phones?
These phones are
I
getting
don't know.
ridiculous. Johnson. You've still got just a little guy, don't you? Little flip phone.
I've got this.
Yeah, dude. See, I've got what I consider to be the max. I don't want to get a phone any bigger than my big fat face. And one of my
Phone
friends,
should not be bigger than your face.
no,
It should be a rule.
one of my friends brought in this fucking brand new Galaxy Note the other day, dude, and this thing is like this tall and like this wide. And he's literally holding like almost. I mean, it's just a fucking cunt hair shy of being the size of a Kindle. Um,
At what point is it devolving, though? I mean, is it going to just move back slowly to like a digital version of the rotary phone?
I've seen like rappers have been walking around with your flip phone now, and they're like, "Oh, that's so retro, dude! It's so cool." But so I think that we might get something like a small flip phone, but people love that giant screen to fuck around on, and I just
Yeah.
don't know how bringing that screen back down to a small size like that, even filling up the entire thing with like a touch screen, is still going to be a little flip phone that can fit in your hand. And people are just loving this giant fucking thing to watch movies on. And I mean, first of all, when innovation does take place, MP Johnson, porn is always the innovator of,
Right,
of,
right.
of technology. When technology moves forward, it's always porn. It's the high definition market. Porn was the first to put their feet in high definition video, and the high speed internet was used to download porn before anything else, and all that stuff. And I swear these giant phones are so people can video each other the Snapchat of their genitals bigger, as big as they can. So I think,
Well, that makes sense, because if you're going to send your genitals around, you want them to be as big as possible.
well, because they're not going to be very big to begin with. So you're going to want to try to like fake your partner out by
It's
making them
so
think like,
big!
well, that has to be a huge donger because it's fucking right in my face. Personally, this is what I think. I think within the next 5, 6, 10 years, we're gonna have the what we always see in these futuristic sci-fi movies, where the 3D image, comes out of the screen. So I think that phones will go back down to a manageable size, but they'll have an option for the display, a pop-out three-dimensional display that can show big dongers. Maybe even as big as you want them to be.
The dong just jumps right out at you.
Can you imagine looking at a dong that's like this, like that, right in your face, with a little bitty phone over here?
That'd be pretty cool.
M.P. Johnson, author of Pork Knuckles Malone, author of Dungeons and Drag Queens, these are novels, and editor of Freak Tension magazine.
Yeah.
Author of
That
many short stories, including short fiction that's been published in Strange Fucking Stories, a book I edited, Strange Sex 2, and you're in a third one. Are you in
Strange Christmas.
Christmas?
A very strange
A
house
Very
Christmas.
Strange House Christmas. Is that the first one we published you in?
Yeah, Yeah, I think so.
That's your Elmo story, right?
Yeah, yeah.
How did we meet up? How did this happen?
I don't know.
We
That's a
were.
mystery. Oh, you
It
know what it
was.
was? We were both in Tampa, Florida, and this giant sea monster came out of the water, and I was like, "What's this sea monster?" And then it like landed on the beach and opened its mouth, and you walked out,
Right.
and I was like, "Dude, that's crazy."
And
And
I
you're
was
like,
like,
"Hi, I'm Kevin Strange. Check
yeah,
out these books."
I've been
And I'm like,
exploring the depths of the ocean bottom, and I brought some books along with me. Um, it was definitely after I read Pork Knuckles Malone. I got my Kindle, and I used my Kindle, uh, what is it, Amazon Prime subscription. I got a
yeah.
free 30 days. I was like, give me some of that MP Johnson Pork Knuckles Malone. So I knew you were out there, and I was a fan, and I wanted to read your novel, and I did. And I believe the very first interaction we had, if I'm not mistaken, was a Goodreads review you left for Robom Apocalypse, my first book.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's
And
right.
I had mixed feelings about this review that you left me.
Was
You
it a
gave,
bad review? It
you
wasn't a
gave,
bad review, was
you
it?
gave me 4 stars. You gave me
4
4
stars.
stars
That's a
for my
good
book.
review.
And I was like, oh, awesome, a new 4-star review. This is cool. And the headline, the bold headline is something like Darth Vader as President Obama. And I was like, oh, fuck this guy. And I read the review, and it's nothing but good. It's nothing but a good review. I was like, why do you fucking bust my balls about Darth Vader in the headline, and then went on to give me a good review and 4 stars? I was like, who the fuck does this guy think he is? And
Kevin Strange, can I tell you about my policy for writing reviews on Goodreads and Amazon?
you can tell me anything you want to, MP Johnson.
It's whatever comes out in the 2 minutes that I want to spend reviewing a book.
Right.
That's what goes on, and I don't edit it. And a lot of them, if you look at them, they don't make any fucking sense.
Yeah.
But, you know.
What it was is you got me, because I hadn't even considered it. I was like, I did fucking write that dude as Darth Vader. I'm a fucking douchebag. And, you still, like I said, you still gave me a good review. I think it's a cool book. It was one of my favorite books to write, because it's just so fucking wacky. And I think I may have used that review as like, well, I need to read what this motherfucker wrote. We'll see what he can do. And that's when I got Pork Knuckles Malone, and I loved it, man. There's so much imagery in that book that's just super cool. Like you did a great job just painting a surreal, weird world with very distinct scenes. Like you just remember the puke scene, or you remember, there's so many different cool things. I especially like the ending where you just completely go off the rails and talk about a whole planet evolving and then coming back. Like it's just you have a great imagination, and I got through the book and was like, all right, that guy can bust my balls about Darth Vader. And
Thank you.
It was shortly after that. I think we were already Facebook friends, but you started contacting us about submitting stories for Strange House. So, do you remember when you first encountered Strange House?
I think actually, Robom Apocalypse was the first encounter. I checked that out. Like, yeah, these guys are doing cool things.
We were trying to do some cool things. I think we did a couple of them at least. A couple
Absolutely.
of cool things out of all that. So we've sort of developed our friendship from there. We accepted more and more. I think I've accepted everything you ever sent Strange House before. I sent Strange House over to Rooster Republic. Now, is Pork Knuckles Bizarro Pulp Press or Rooster Republic? Yep. I can't remember.
That's Bizarro Pulp Press.
All right. Well, we're gonna fucking backtrack, because this is what I like to do. This is what we do with this show, is we sort of track the. And this is not the first time you've been on the show. You were on the show for the Strange Sex 2.
Yeah, the Strange Sex 2 orgy of authors.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I can't believe it stayed as organized as it did, considering how many fucking weirdos we had on the show at the same
Yeah,
time.
it's
Right?
actually kind of absurd that it's almost frustrating that it stayed so organized. Like,
Yeah.
why was there not more chaos?
Yeah, and I mean, it was right from the very beginning. You guys were just very polite. You just sat there and waited for me to call on you, and you quickly and concisely answered my questions, and then we moved on to the next author. I was like, well, this is going to be a piece of cake. Uh, but I didn't get to go very in-depth with any of you guys. So I'm very happy to have you on the show today. You're one of my favorite authors, but not only one of my favorite authors, you're one of my favorite Bizarro personalities.
Okay.
You have a way about yourself that you're always positive. You always look like you're having fun. You do a ton of live readings, traveling. You're always promoting a show somewhere. You're very punk rock with your approach to Bizarro fiction, in addition to being extremely talented and having a very unique style. So I look up to you definitely when I'm in the middle of having some public crisis or meltdown. I'm always saying to myself, MP Johnson would never sink to this level. So first of all, we're going to go back to the beginning, and we're going to figure out what made this character, MP Johnson, come to life. What made him who he is. So,
wow.
First of all, I want to know what the MP stands for. I know your first name is Matthew.
Yes.
Is it Matthew Paul? It's Matthew Paul. All right.
You got it.
Matthew Paul Johnson. So before there was an MP Johnson, Bizarro auteur, there was Matthew Paul.
Yep, that's correct. And I thought that...
Go ahead.
I was going to say I went with the MP for a couple of reasons. At the time, there were at least a handful of other Matt Johnsons out there working in the horror and weird fiction community, so I didn't want to step on their toes. And I also didn't want to come up with, I don't know, maybe I was just lazy. I wanted it still to be connected to me. I didn't want it to be like a completely unrecognizable pen name, so I figured I'll just go with the initials.
Right. It works. I like it. It's very distinctive in our circle. There's nobody out there that you're going to get confused when you're talking about MP Johnson for a number of reasons. But just looking at the name, it's a good name. It's a strong name. But before there was an MP Johnson, there was a Matthew Paul.
Yes.
Let's talk about how he became interested in fiction writing. What age were you when you first started to, everybody that, we all start, all of us writers, we start as passionate readers. So at what point were you realizing that you loved to read?
Actually, it's interesting that you say that, because I did not start out as a passionate reader. I kind of, and this is one of my terrible regrets in life, is that I didn't get really started reading hardcore until a little later than I should have, and I've missed some books. And just last year, I read my first Stephen King book, which
really
is nuts. But so I started writing first. Like
really?
As soon as I learned how to put words on paper, I was writing stories, and I drew too. So I drew monsters, and I wrote little stories to accompany them, and I just spent a lot of time in my room writing really weird stories and drawing monsters with them. Eventually, I started digging into comic books, and probably didn't start, I did a little bit of reading in middle school and high school, didn't really start reading hardcore until after high school.
I think that a lot of us that are around the same age suffer from the same issue, and I talked about this on the last show a lot, is there was a big gap in Saturday morning cartoons in the late 80s and early 90s, Saturday morning cartoons that were, when we were talking about this before the show started, that were really subversive and really weird and really pushed pushed the boundaries and really kind of activated the imagination of a generation. At the same time that we had those Saturday morning cartoons, we had the most vile, extreme, ridiculous movies that we could rent in video stores. Trauma movies.
Yeah.
The movies from Empire Pictures that later on became Full Moon Pictures, and just a slew of no-name crap that we would digest. I used to, I grew up living with my grandparents, but I would often visit my dad, and my brother lived there, and so me and my younger brother, and it was a ritual for years. Every Friday or every other Friday night, we would go rent 4 or 5 monster movies and order pizza and stay up all night watching as many of them as we could until we fell asleep, and then we would wake up in time to watch Saturday morning cartoons. Yep. And then do the whole thing over again Saturday night. And that was a ritual for years and years. And so for that generation, for us from the late 80s and early 90s, for us there really wasn't a lot of that type of fast, loud, weird, gory literature for us. I found my fun in the Goosebumps books.
Yeah.
In 93, 94, I read as many of them as I could, and for a while that's almost the only thing I read because nothing else had that Saturday morning cartoon or extreme B-movie feel to it. And I don't think that we really caught up with that until the late 90s with the splatterpunk movement, and even that gave us the gore, but didn't really give us the zaniness that we grew up with.
That's a good point.
And I think that we, as the generation of Bizarro authors that really started to pick up steam and really started to put stuff out 2005, 2006, 2007, I think is when you really started to see that take off and really becomes, we all sort of saw the corners of it, and we've been attracted to the Bizarro scene because that's our Saturday morning cartoons. That's our extreme, cheesy, corny B-movie stuff in fiction form, which we've never had before. And I think we're the generation that's writing that. I think we're the generation that, and I'm really not sure that the younger generation or the older generation before us or the younger generation after us are even going to give a fuck about this stuff, because I think it was unique to a certain age group of kids. The kids today don't have the weird shit we had growing up, and the older generation just beyond us was they were just too wrapped up in being young adults to really care about the stuff that we did when we were young. So it's kind of like a snapshot of a childhood and now a snapshot of adulthood that I think might just be unique to us.
I think it totally is, and I think it's that kind of last pre-internet generation. We were kind of the last generation that grew up without instant access to everything. So we had to go to video stores and hunt shit down, and all of this Bizarro is very fueled by the B-movies, by the Saturday morning cartoons, by the heavy metal and punk rock stuff, and like all the weird shit, comic books, all the weird stuff that we had to hunt down. That now, I wouldn't say that it isn't out there, but I think that kids now maybe take it for granted because, I can find it in 2 seconds. You don't have that hunting down and discovering it and kind of making it yours and then finding that one other kid who's like, yeah, I know the Toxic Avenger.
Man, I think I've talked about it on the show before, but there was a moment the hardest I've ever geeked out in my life was me, and I had those 2 or 3 other guys that were into weird shit that grew up loving Evil Dead 2 and Dead Alive and Akira and just the weirdest, most extreme crap we could come up with. And this is dial-up internet era. The most you could come up with was pictures of dead people from Rotten.com. That was like the most extreme thing you could get from the internet. The internet wasn't a fertile ground for weird shit yet.
Right.
It was still in those comic books and those movies and the shit like that. And I remember one day after school, my friends picked me up and they said, we're going over to this dude's house. He got fan mail. He got a fan letter published in issue number 14 of the Max. I was like, oh my
What?
god, oh my god, he's a Max head, and they're like, yeah, dude, we'll show it to you when we get there. And he had this fucking issue framed, and he pulled it down, and he showed us which fan letter was his and everything, and we geeked out so hard. And it's that special connection to the art and to each other that this generation just absolutely does not have. Everything for us, the internet is a great playground because we can find every little weird thing that we heard rumors about, but never could never find. It was just going to be impossible to find that stuff. It's there
Every
for us.
movie that I read about in Psychotronic magazine, but didn't have like $50 to send out for a bootleg VHS of it. Yeah,
We can own all that stuff now, or at least watch it on the internet. And
for sure.
while the generation after us can do the same thing, to them, entertainment is just like they care more about their time than they care about what is entertaining them. If they have to spend more than 3 minutes on a YouTube video, they're out. They've got too many other things that are bombarding them, and none of that stuff is special. Because I was talking to my buddy about this on the phone the other night. Anything you want to be into, any scene you want to be a part of, any culture you want to be a part of, there are top 10 lists and video tutorials and everything you've ever needed to be a wise and well-read or well-watched member of a clique or a fucking subculture is available at the click of a button. If you want to be a punk rocker, if you want to be a goth kid, if you want to be a B-movie head, any of that stuff, you are an expert. If you put maybe a week worth of research in, you're suddenly an expert, because everything that's all the information has been cataloged. All the wisdom has been laid out before you, and all you have to do is consume it, and then suddenly you're an expert. You can be an expert on B-movies in a week. You can know every obscure top 10, top 50, top 150 best, obscure cult films of all time that were never released on VHS. Boom, 10 minutes of research, and then spend a week watching, fast forwarding through them, and suddenly you're King Dick of your group of cult horror fans. It's just not the same as it was in our generation, where everything was word of mouth, and there were so many mysterious, legends surrounding certain movies, or uncut versions of certain movies that the video stores didn't carry that particular version of it. But this one video store 50 miles away, they carried a copy of it, and Joe saw it once and rented it. And then you all sit around Joe, and Joe tells you all the scenes in the movie that you haven't seen, and the extended kills and this and that, and that just doesn't exist in this current culture, for better or worse. We have it all, but none of it's important.
I think that it's informed the way that I communicate about all of this weird stuff, because it can't be a simple conversation about, oh, do you like trauma? I like trauma. It can't. You need to understand how they discovered trauma, like what trauma means to them. And I'm using trauma as an example, but it could be a conversation about anything, whatever bands you're into. Like, I'm so bored with the conversation of, do you like this band? I like that band. I want a conversation where somebody expresses their passion about some obscure thing and explains why they're into it. And whether I'm into it or not is totally irrelevant to the conversation. I just want to hear about why someone else is passionate about it.
Well, yeah, I think that's what I think.
Checking off a list of cool things.
Yeah, I think that's what transcends the ability to become an expert in a week. Is like, well, you've been into that since last week. That doesn't mean anything. Yeah, we all know what it is, but when did you discover? What did it do? How did it affect your life? How does it affect you as an artist? So that's
exactly.
That's kind of where we're at right now. So MP Johnson is still Matthew Paul, and he's growing up. And what are your favorite comic books and movies at the time? Like, what do you think really influenced you said you're drawing monsters and you're writing stories about your monsters. What was the shit that made you so passionate about monsters that you had to get your own out of your head and down onto paper?
Oh man, there's all of these little new. Oh, hang on a second. I want to show and tell something.
Okay. This is the part of the show where I should be filling in and talking while MP Johnson's not here, but I'm a bad host. I just stared at an empty chair.
Was that unprofessional of me?
No, it was unprofessional of me. I just was just like, wonder what he's got.
So when I was in grade school, they had these little book fairs at the school, and like they would come in and set up a table of books, and you'd get a little newsletter, and you could see what books are going to be for sale, and then you had to go home and talk your parents into giving you, a few dollars to spend on these books. Yeah. And this was like, I begged my parents so hard for this book. It's called, I think it's just called Monsters. It's just called Monsters, right?
Now, that's not. Now, when I was growing up, it was called Scholastic, and you get the little pamphlet, and then on Friday they would set up the whole library with these Scholastic books. Is that part of the Scholastic series, or is it something different?
It's not published by Scholastic. It's published by Gloucester Press, and it's like, so this came out. I must have got this in like the early to mid 80s, and I just remember like staring at all of the monsters in here and being like, oh, I love all of these monsters, and I wanted to invent my own monsters, and I wanted to write about these monsters. Let me get to the Minotaur, because we were talking about the Minotaur.
Yeah. We were talking about, that's a cool ass looking Minotaur.
Yeah.
We were talking before the show started about how ridiculously underrepresented the Minotaur is in film.
In film and fiction, there's not a lot of, here comes the fucking Minotaur to gore you.
I came up with a couple of examples. I came up with the recent Seth Rogen. What the fuck is the other guy's name? Anyway, they made a stoner sword and sorcery movie that I can't remember the name of either. James Franco is the other guy, and there's a Minotaur in a maze in that movie, and it's a pretty cool, pretty funny scene. But they pretty much just use the Minotaur as like a throwaway joke. And then one of the Sinbad movies, I don't remember if it's the Seventh Voyage or the Golden Voyage. What was the one about the tiger?
Wasn't that Seventh Voyage?
Was it? I thought that there was actually a Sinbad that was like Sinbad in the Eye of the Tiger or something.
Oh yeah, maybe that's it.
I don't remember which one had a Minotaur, but it was like a big iron or golden robot Minotaur that was like a giant.
Yeah,
cool.
But probably some Ray Harryhausen special effects too.
Definitely Ray Harryhausen. Yeah,
brilliant.
I can't remember any other examples beyond that of Minotaurs. Now centaurs, on the other hand, they are very represented, and they show up all the time.
Yeah, they're popping up all over the place.
Do you think that it's because they have human heads and torsos that they're more relatable to an audience, and that's why they're more comfortable to be, they're more they're more accessible, so they're used more often, whereas the Minotaur is a giant fucking bullhead with a man body?
That's probably it. And that's boring as fuck, because I just want monsters. I just want monsters.
We need a Minotaur anthology is what we need.
We do.
I got to jump ahead real quick. We're going to continue down along your journey, your path to becoming MP Johnson. But let's talk about this G.G. Allen fucking anthology that you cooked up.
Oh, I'm so excited about this book.
Dude, this thing is getting a huge amount of play. All I did was mention that I was writing a story for the thing to submit to the thing, and I had people popping up going, when are you releasing your G.G. Allen book? I was like, whoa, it's not my G.G. Allen book. I'm just writing a fucking story. It may not even be in the book. So I reposted the badass limited edition cover that you guys are going to be putting out through the Kickstarter, and people are sharing it left and right. Like, dude, I think the world is ready for a bizarro fiction anthology about G.G. Allen. Who would have guessed?
Yeah, it blows my mind. I'm really excited that people are into it. It's one of those things where, like, I have been dreaming about this book for many years, and I think it was at a Bizarro Con, Carlton Mellick had that line, write the book that you want to read. And I was like, well, I'm not going to write it, but I will edit it, and now it will be out in the world. But I want to clarify one point. So the cover that's going around on the internet is the Justin Kuntz cover. That's the regular edition cover.
Oh, that's the regular edition cover.
That's the regular edition cover. There's going to be a limited.
That's not even the too crazy for print version?
No.
Oh my god.
The limited edition cover by Dan Weeken is so fucked up that I don't think it can appear on Facebook.
I can't even.
So,
I don't even know how to process this because the cover that you've already got. You know, let me tell you, one of the funniest parts about this anthology is the call for submissions that you put out. One of the examples you said is, you know, a such and such story will probably have a better chance of getting in than G.G. Allen versus a werewolf. There is not one, but two werewolves on the cover of this book, sir. Please explain yourself.
It was an example. I really wanted to illustrate to people that they need to get really weird with these stories to get in the book. And like I'm reading through some of the submissions and that point hasn't come across because I'm still getting some submissions that are just they're basically like G.G. Allen was like in real life, which is not what I'm looking for. You can watch videos on YouTube of G.G. Allen throwing shit and punching people. We want stories that are insane. So like I would say the base level of craziness for this book is G.G. Allen fighting werewolves. We want you to go above that.
Why the two? Why two werewolves on the cover of this book?
I think Justin likes doing werewolves. I threw out maybe Gigi fighting werewolves, and he took it. I mean, they look beautiful.
Do they not
look beautiful?
That cover is so cool. And I am a huge fucking werewolf fan, so I think that minotaurs are totally underrepresented, but I think werewolves are not only underrepresented in horror, but misrepresented in modern horror, where they always get relegated to the sidekick of the vampire, like that's ever been a thing that mattered. You know, like that coupling has ever been a thing that fucking, like Dracula versus the Wolfman. Was there ever a Dracula versus Wolfman? I know it was a Frankenstein versus the Wolfman. There
was probably a Dracula versus the Wolfman.
It probably made them all fight.
Yeah, everybody had to go to battle after When Universal Studios started running thin on ideas, they were like, just have them fight each other.
But I think as far as like really, really rock solid representations of werewolves in cinema, you have, of course, you have The Howling, which I think is, I always put The Howling at number one because I like bipedal werewolves, but most people put American Werewolf in London as number one. Personally, while that has the coolest transformation into a wolf, I'm not into the four-legged werewolf because that just looks like a wolf, and I've seen wolves. Bipedal werewolves don't really exist in life, whereas the feral, they're bigger and they're more ferocious looking, but the four-legged werewolf is just not impressive to me. We've already seen that. It's already a thing.
I fully agree with you. I am a big fan of Howling 3, the marsupials.
That's the one where they're all in the bottom of a castle, and they're all it's like a castle maze. They're being chased around by werewolves in the castle.
That's part 2, which is also cool. But part 3 is the weird one that they just decided to outsource to Australia, and it's like it has that Aussie horror, that 80s Aussie horror vibe that was coming out at the time. And it's bonkers. It's way more bonkers than any other entry in the Howling series.
I'm gonna have to revisit it because I'm not placing it right now. And
you gotta check it out again because it's my favorite Howling
movie. Part 2
movies.
is when I was a kid, werewolves were my favorite, and again there were just so few werewolf movies that it was like when there was a werewolf movie on, it was time to sit the fuck down and shut the fuck up. And
Absolutely.
I remember being at my dad's house, and he had Showtime and Cinemax. And my grandparents didn't. My grandparents had HBO. My dad had Cinemax and Showtime. Cinemax and Showtime is where the good titty stuff was. That was my coming of age stuff. That's where I put hair on my chest. But I was watching Cinemax one day, and like The Howling 2 was up next. I was like, holy shit, there's a part 2. And this fucking movie ends up being like this werewolf orgy titty movie that I was like, I love werewolves and I love titties, and this is like this awkward mashup of the two that was just like, I just don't know if this is as wank material. I loved it. As an actual film, I was like, what in the fuck am I watching? Because The Howling 1 was so cool to me. It was such a badass fucking movie, and The Howling 2 was just such a step down in quality, in story, and what more importantly, what mattered to me as a kid was the makeup. The werewolf heads looked like fucking shit compared to how badass the bipedal werewolves were in part 1.
Yeah.
You know what I think one of the best looking werewolves in a movie is a movie that most people don't acknowledge as a werewolf film because it's sort of an anthology story. You know which one I'm talking about? An anthology movie with a badass looking werewolf?
No. What are we
Waxwork.
talking about? Waxwork. I don't know if I've ever seen Waxwork, Kevin Strange.
Oh, man, Waxwork is this stupid movie about these kids that stumble into a fucking wax museum and they each individually fall into one of the, and it's a horror wax museum. So there's just a scene in wax and then a red velvet rope, and all of these kids split up and inexplicably fall over one of the ropes, and one of them ends up in a vampire story, one of them ends up in a werewolf story, one of them, and on and on and on. And the kid that ends up in the werewolf movie, I can't remember the fucking guy's name. Rice Davies. What is his first name? The big burly English fellow that's in all the fantasy movies. Something Rice Davies. But he plays
Jonathan Rice Davies.
Jonathan Rice Davies. He's sitting at a table and he's like, "You gotta get out of here. You gotta go now." And the kid's like, "What are you talking about? Like, I'm in a wax museum. Where's the, like, how am I in a cabin in the woods now?" And he's like, "You don't understand." And the moon shines in and suddenly his eyes change and he turns into one of the coolest looking werewolves. His fucking ears, he looks like a rabbit. His ears are so tall. And he's a badass looking werewolf.
Nice.
So I don't put that in the top 5 like werewolf movies because it's not all a werewolf movie. The werewolf scene is maybe 5 minutes long.
Sure.
But definitely one of the coolest looking werewolves in a movie. So
nice.
Anyway, I don't know
Did you see the show Werewolf that was on Fox in like late 80s, early 90s?
The thing about Werewolf that I remember is that the intro was badass. What I remember about the show itself, it's like, isn't it like it's like the werewolf perspective, like the point of view, and isn't it all red? Like it's like the werewolf running through the woods and chasing people, and the perspective of it. It's not infrared, but it's just like they put like a red to represent like the werewolf vision was like a red filter over it.
There's definitely some of that.
The show itself, I don't remember very much of.
It was, it was very episodic. Like the good werewolf lands in a city and somehow saves someone by using his werewolf powers. But the bad werewolf in that show was played by Chuck Connors, the rifleman, and he like this one-eyed, burly old werewolf, gray-haired werewolf. That was a badass werewolf.
Nice. Do you remember the vampire show? It wasn't The Dark Knight, but it was something.
Oh, Forever Night.
Forever Night, where he slept in the trunk of his car.
He looked too nice. I never watched that show because they all look too. I hate vampire stuff where they're all like fancy looking.
He was kind of fancy looking. He was supposed to be like a hard-boiled like city detective. I don't remember if it was New York or what, probably, but they did it. It was very Highlander-esque, where they would do flashbacks to him in the dainty, Renaissance era.
Yeah.
And he was a blonde werewolf or blonde vampire. I remember that. Not into the blonde pretty boy vampires.
I don't want my monsters to be cute. I want my monsters.
Well, the vampire thing, it's hard to like. There's very few cool vampire movies that use them monstrously. Like
I know, and that's sad.
Near Dark and 30 Days of Night. And
Nosferatu.
Not many.
Not many.
Not very many. MP Johnson.
Damn shame.
we're just talking about shit. We're not talking about your career.
Oh shit! My
So
career.
we were talking about like what were the kinds of things that sort of inspired you to get to work doing your monster drawings and your monster stories. You showed us your book of monsters that you got when you were a kid, and I'm we've talked about enough B movies and crap now. What about comic books? What were your comic book influences at the time?
I was really into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like it's interesting because they had the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series that was based on the animated series, and that's the ones that they wanted to channel the kids into. Mm-hmm. But I accidentally went for the black and white series that was more like over the top and adult oriented, and I got right into that, and that was awesome.
Now I have to confess here, it's embarrassing, and I regret it now, but back in the day, again at my dad's house, down the street there was a milk store, and the milk store carried comic books. So I would walk down there and I would buy comic books, and they carried both the colorized kids-friendly Ninja Turtles and the black and white adult-oriented Turtles. And guess which one I didn't buy because it wasn't in color?
Oh no!
Stupid, I know. Dumb. But as a kid, for some reason, I demanded my comic books be in color, and so I missed out on those books for a lot of years.
I think that growing up, one of the things was my dad and I would watch a lot of horror movies and a lot of like black and white horror movies, like the old school Universal stuff. So I think I was very into black and white, and I had kind of an association of black and white with cool, weird stuff. So I think that kind of helped attract me to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and then I started digging into other black and white comics of the time. Because there's hardly any black and white comics coming out now, which is kind of a shame. But like back in the day, that like after Turtles came out, there was a big indie comics boom, and there was so much weird black and white shit coming out. And I started digging into that and the mainstream comics too, and just like tons of ideas.
Some of the big ones I remember now that were black and white. Wasn't Milk and Cheese black and white?
Yeah, I think Milk and Cheese was black and white.
And then Judge Dredd was black and white.
Judge Dredd had some black and white, yeah. There's so much stuff. Like I was really into Flaming Carrot. Have you ever read Flaming Carrot?
Yeah, not I've never owned it myself, but some of my friends had that stuff and Milk and Cheese, and I would read them.
Yeah.
Just sporadically when I was at their house.
For sure. Flaming Carrot was just absurd. I love Flaming Carrot. So many good things. And yeah, and then I was watching the movies, and it's interesting. So I was just thinking about this because you mentioned Evil Dead 2. One of my earliest experiences with, seeing fucked up movies, and I think this kind of gelled it in my mind that this stuff is messed up. I just happened to walk into the living room when my parents were watching Evil Dead 2, and it was the eyeball shooting out into the mouth scene,
awesome.
Right?
Awesome.
And I just remember I saw the scene, and then my parents freaked out. They're like, "Get out of here! Yeah. You can't see this!" And I was like, "Oh my god, I need to see that!"
Yeah. Two of mine, the two that stick out the most in my mind are I crept out of my room while my parents were watching Monty Python's Meaning of Life during the obese man exploding scene. And I had never seen anything as terrifying in my life. And they freaked out, told me to go back in my room, shut the door, and the rest of the night I was like, why did that fat guy blow up? Why did he eat so much? Why didn't someone stop him from eating? Does that really happen? If I eat that much, am I going to explode? And the second one, I didn't get caught. I actually left the room of my own accord. It freaked me out so much. Was I can't even remember if it's in Creepshow 1 or Creepshow 2, The Raft.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's just the like slime in the water that comes up.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I walk in the room during the scene where it's like the two people left, the guy and the girl, and the fucking slime comes up and grabs the girl and is like yanking her down, and it's like I was just like, fuck. fuck. Because it's almost, we've been talking online on Facebook in the groups, in the Bizarro groups a lot this week about melting stuff, and that's not necessarily a melting thing as something like Slime City or Street Trash is, but that monster starts melting that chick down, and that was like that was a big deal. That was a big horrific thing to me as a kid, so I ran the fuck out of the room and was like, I just don't need to watch big people movies anymore. I can't take them.
I feel like slime and melting go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So my first melt movie experience was my dad had all these old issues of Famous Monsters of Filmland and stuff, all these like musty smelling, like falling apart issues that he had from when he was a kid. And one of them had the Incredible Melting Man on the cover. And I was just like, what is this? And I think I've been obsessed with melting ever since.
For me, it was Troma's meltdowns. Troma always did great meltdowns.
Yeah.
Class of Nukem High and Toxic Avenger. Those were my first experiences with Meltdown, because they would have the green slime coming out of their mouths and stuff. Love that stuff. Did you ever get into Toxic Crusaders, the cartoon they made?
Absolutely.
I had the toys.
They had a comic book too.
Yeah.
I got the
comic book, the toys, the show. I mean, I was the biggest Troma head. Now, what's weird is I've
got my Toxie action figure right above my workstation.
I've got one behind me.
Perfect.
What's weird is I actually liked Charles Band. I thought that Lloyd Kaufman was a creepy fucking weirdo. And I hated his introductions because he never talked about the movie. He just was just this like weird puppet guy, older guy with a dumb bow tie that just yelled a lot, and then the movie started and the movies were awesome. But what Charles Band did was Charles Band never appeared at the beginning of the movies. You just watched a movie, and then afterwards he shows you how he made the puppets, and he shows you how he made the monsters. And those Video Zone movies were that was like what originally sparked my passion to become a filmmaker and make monsters on film, was watching those Video Zones, the behind the scenes of the Full Moon movies. But I like Troma movies more. I always wished that they would do the same thing at the end of Troma movies, but without the weirdo Lloyd Kaufman guy. And, finally, growing up, and I had access to their special edition DVDs when they first started putting them out in the late 90s, I got to watch those feature-length behind-the-scenes, and it was actually the feature-length behind-the-scenes movie for the Toxic Avenger 4, Citizen Toxie, that made me finally, it was like the straw that broke the camel's back, and I actually started picking up a video camera and making shit, because the absolute chaos and stupidity on the set of that movie, and they still made one of my favorite films, because that was, to me, like Toxie 4 was like the pinnacle of our generation. It was like the most offensive, the most ridiculous, satirical, extreme, violent movie. It was like everything that had come before it in the 90s was like, it led up to Toxic Avenger 4, and so that was like, I would show everybody, like, you want to see the most cool, fucked up, stupid thing? It's Toxic Avenger 4. And watching that feature-length behind-the-scenes movie, Apocalypse Soon is what they called it.
Yeah.
Really, like, the fact that they could have absolutely no idea what they were doing, absolutely no money. Half of the fucking people come to work on the movie quit because they were so dumb with, how they were making the movie. These people were just like, you're fucking doing a terrible job. This is how you should do it. And then Coffin being like, if you think I'm doing a terrible job, you can just leave. And half the crew fucking takes off and leaves them with their fucking ass out. And Lloyd Kaufman standing there going, you know what? I'll use the short black guy for Toxie. I don't care if he's a tall white guy. I don't give a fuck if he can't come to the set on the time that we tell him to come to the set. I'll use the little guy and fuck up the whole movie. I don't care. I was like, oh my god, if this guy can get a movie done, anybody can get a movie done. And,
hell yeah. Yeah, I love Troma. I am like a huge Charles Band and Full Moon and Empire fan. I love that, like, he just, okay, love Lloyd Kaufman, love Troma, but you can count the good Lloyd Kaufman films on like two hands. Charles Band's movies, he's like, I'm just gonna pummel you with movies
from the late 70s to yesterday.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna keep, like, regardless of how much money I have, I'm gonna put out a movie. I'm gonna put out like 4 fucking movies a year at least.
At the peak,
And
they were doing like 12 him
I know
directorial movies. Charles Band was doing fucking kids movies. He was doing horror movies. They were doing sci-fi movies.
they were doing adult, like, softcore stuff
Yeah,
for a
they did. They had the
while.
softcore
It's
line. That's right.
insane. But like his energy combined with his creativity is like super inspiring to me. Let's just do cool shit and get it out there.
Yeah,
I love
and the quality level is definitely like it goes from like unwatchable drivel that obviously costs $2 to some of the most awesome. Like I don't think he's ever made movies as great as during the late Empire era when he actually had
some money.
the high tens of thousands of dollars to making movies for like 60, 75, $85,000, which for those types of movies was really high in the 80s. But I'm talking like he made some of the coolest fucking movies ever. Reanimator and From Beyond, all the Lovecraftian stuff that they did, and he didn't necessarily, he produced that stuff. He didn't necessarily direct most of it. All of this, the whole Stuart Gordon line, and what is it, Brian Yuzna? Is that how you pronounce his name?
Yeah, Brian.
Yuzna?
I think it's Yuzna.
Yuzna. But all those, when he produced their movies and shit and had enough money to actually make them great, I mean, there's nothing better. I don't think there's anything better than a late era Empire movies. Those are fucking awesome monster films.
For sure. Eliminators is one of my favorite movies.
Is Eliminators the one where it's got the guy that has the tread legs and the shooting? I've never actually seen that movie.
Oh, it's brilliant, man. There's a man-borg, there's like a pirate, there's a ninja, there's a flying robot thing, and they're on this river quest, and there's this time-traveling guy who wants to be a Roman emperor.
There's two movies. Two movies that I remember from the video store as a kid, and I couldn't rent them because they were. This is how I'm aging myself. They had beta and VHS mixed in together on the wall, and Eliminators and Neon Maniacs were only on beta, and they didn't have the VHS versions of those movies. So I grew up with the covers in my face, taunting me, and I still haven't seen Eliminators, but I finally got to see Neon Maniacs a few years ago, and that movie is bonkers.
Absolutely.
We're doing a terrible job of interviewing you, MP Johnson.
We're just talking about
movies.
This is what conversations with me often go like, though.
No, I was hoping that we could get to talk a lot about this stuff because I remember when we were at BizarroCon together, we did this like little impromptu game where there was a whole bunch of us just kind of sitting around one night. There was nothing to do. All the events and stuff were over for the day. We were all sitting in the ad house just kind of chilling, which is where people did the readings and also where we had the parties. It was like a little apartment, and it's like just a little apartment house out there by itself, and that was like the main area where everybody congregated, and we're just sitting there, and we came up with this game where we would start to describe a movie based on its IMDb or Wikipedia synopsis without using the title of the movie, and MP Johnson knew everything about everything. MP Johnson has seen all of the movies, folks.
All of the weird movies.
You're not going to get anything past that guy. I mean, I was pulling out some really weird, obscure stuff, but what impressed me more than anything was Garrett Cook went for, like, the snooty foreign films, and he doesn't even knew about those. He even nailed all of those in, like, 2 sentences.
All that Ingmar Bergman shit.
Yeah. So I knew when we did a show together there was going to be a lot of talk about movies because I'm a huge cult movie fan. MP Johnson's a huge cult movie fan. So I knew we'd be able to do this, and this is fun. This is cool.
Totally.
But let's try to get back into the conversation. Like, let's move it up a little bit. So you're drawing monsters and you're writing little stories about them. When did you get to a point where you said, I want to see this in print? I want to take this, not that you weren't taking it seriously, but you were creating art for yourself because you had the drive and the passion to create your own monsters and create your own stories about them. But at what point did you say, it's time for other people to experience these things that I create?
I think I started submitting stories around 18, 19, like just as I was finishing up high school and starting college. and it was a hilarious endeavor because I didn't have a lot of internet access, and that was kind of just at the start of internet anyway, like, you know, internet for everybody. But so I was looking at Writer's Market, and I was sending up my fucked up monster stories to like literary literary magazines and getting just really like angry rejection letters, and I'm like, what am I doing wrong?
Wow. Because there wasn't really a market for that stuff. There really wasn't.
I mean, there was Cemetery Dance and Weird Tales, and then I didn't really know what else was out there because all I had to look at was Writer's Market, and it didn't really have any horror listings, and I didn't like.
And
I
again,
still don't.
for people that are young today that take for granted the fact that your phone has instant high-speed internet and the hard drive on your phone is like 500 gigabytes. When guys like me and MP Johnson were getting into the internet, I remember that I would go to my buddy's house after school, and his mom was an internet addict, and she had AOL, America Online, dial-up. And they would give you like 50,000 hours for free or something, but you had to have a phone line to connect to the internet. It would sometimes take her from the time I showed up after school till the time I was getting ready to go home for dinner to actually connect to America Online just to be able to do things textually. Go into chat rooms that didn't have any image graphics at all, just text, or going on websites that had rudimentary information, but it was still like all this like misinformation and legend that our generation really had the facts wrong most of the time. There was no fact checking. There was no Wikipedia. There really was no way to know if you were right or wrong about something. So when I was a teenager, one of the most passionate things in my life was rock and roll and metal music, and things like Jonathan Davis from Korn has AIDS, and Marilyn Manson took his ribs out so he could suck his own dick. These were things that not only were they in like the rock and roller and metal fan like consciousness, but when you went on to fact check that stuff on the internet, it was right there. It was verified in black and white on the internet metal sites that these things had happened, because nobody fucking knew anything about anything at the time. So when MP Johnson talks about how he had limited access to the internet, even when you had full access to the internet, actually getting on it and staying on it was a big deal, and the information there was very unreliable.
And even search engines, like early search engines like Alta Vista, you try and look up something, and you gotta dig through porn first and advertisements, and like maybe you'd find something that was close to what you were looking for.
Yeah, and you're talking the most slow, excruciating load times for pages. If they had one graphic off to the side was enough to stall you out for 5 minutes trying to load this site that's just all text. Oh man, do you remember when GIF images was like the big fucking thing, where like they had like this fake fire that they would have at the top of the page,
or little waterfalls going down.
Waterfalls, or
little sparkly wand,
or spinning skulls that were like laughing.
Right,
the dumbest shit, and it would take so long to load those fucking things.
And then beyond that, it was dial-up, so we only had one line. So when my mom wanted to make a call, or anyone else, I've got two brothers and my parents who all want to make calls at various times. I got to get off the internet. And
you don't even have to get off the internet. They just pick up the phone and you're done.
You're gone. That's right.
And you're only halfway loaded up on these dumbass fucking floating skulls that are laughing. You haven't even got to the lies that you're trying to verify at the bottom of the page.
Right.
The internet was a very, very weird place in the 90s.
So needless to say, I got a lot of rejection letters. And
how did you deal with that? As a writer, did you feel like I'm just not reaching the right audience, or did you take it personally, like maybe I'm not a good writer, maybe it's not the subject matter, but it's maybe that I'm not qualified to be doing this? Did you ever take it personally like that, or did you know you just weren't reaching the right markets?
I had a feeling that I wasn't reaching the right markets because the rejection letters kind of hinted that, like, this is not for us. This isn't really what we're about. And as a cocky kid, I'm like, well, I'm not going to bother reading these literary journals to find out if they publish my sort of stuff. I don't have time for that.
Well, it's not even the time. It's that stuff just was not for us.
Right.
That stuff was for a previous generation, and really, like we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, there was a huge gap in literature for us, the type of stuff that appeals to us. Because, I mean, listen to the joy in us just recounting stupid trauma movies and Empire Pictures. Like, there should have been a representation for that in literature, and maybe there was to a certain point. Like, if you were into science fiction, you could get into Douglas Adams, and he was real subversive and cool and cartoony and weird, but beyond that, there wasn't really anything for us hardcore horror fans and monster fans.
It's interesting. So what happened to me in terms of, like, my fandom of literature is I went through, I discovered Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, started reading comics, and at some point in middle school, I started getting into the underground comics, more and more subversive stuff, and there's stuff being referenced, stuff being mentioned in letter columns and whatnot, and then stuff comes out when you're reading about movies too. And so I kind of skipped, like, the Goosebumps phase, the Stephen King phase, the stuff that, people would normally start with. And, like, in middle school, I went straight to William S. Burroughs, and that was, like, the first books that I really fell in love with was, like, William S. Burroughs and like Harlan Ellison stuff and Jim Carroll stuff. So that's kind of what I jumped into, and I missed out on, like, that phase where I should have been trying to read every Dean Koontz book or some shit.
See, for me, Stephen King is really selective. He doesn't write a lot of cool monster stuff, and a lot of the stuff that he writes is so long-winded and boring. I'm sorry, but it is. When he's on, he's great. When he's on, there's nobody better. But when he's not, but the majority of the time, he's writing for bored housewives that want the shit to be episodic and take forever.
Yeah.
They want the book to take as long as possible, and they aren't into monsters. They're into the weird supernaturally stuff and people seeming good but turning out to be bad. Maybe they're possessed. And I don't know about you, but I've never been a fan of possession. I feel like if you make a possession story, you're robbing me of a potential monster to look at.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. Like, I like kind of the concept of, the fear of being taken over, but in execution, there's, like you said, you're robbed of monsters. There's no cool monster to look at. You're looking at the monster's inside of a person. That's boring.
That's why I hated Jason Goes to Hell, because they turned it into a possession story, and why I cannot stand this show that people are crazy about called Supernatural. It's still airing today because their monsters are just people with contacts in their eyes.
Yeah.
Don't give me a fucking guy with contacts in his eyes and manipulate his voice to make him sound evil. Like, that's not a monster. I'm sorry, but that's not a monster to me. One of the reasons I love. Go ahead.
If I want to watch Gilmore Girls, I'll watch Gilmore Girls. I don't need to disguise it and have some funny contact lenses and call it a monster show and have it be supernatural. If I want to watch, like, my teenage girl dramas, I don't need it packaged as a monster show to make it more acceptable to me.
I actually do watch Gilmore Girls.
No, that's cool. That's what I'm saying. Like, just go straight to the pure source of, like, cheesy teenage girl television.
Well, and I was getting ready to mention that the one that the TV show, the teenage girl, teeny bopper TV show that I actually loved was Buffy the Vampire Slayer, because Buffy never shied away from showing you monsters. There's a ton of awesome effects on that show, like practical monster effects, and it didn't. I mean, they went all out. That show had a nice budget, so you'd have these fucking monsters. First of all, the vampires looked cool. They were the scary-ish looking monsters. Sometimes they were cheesy and cutesy, but they still had, like, the fucking demony fucking face on him, at least give me that. If you're gonna give me a vampire, at least give me the furrowed brow. Make him look like a Klingon. If you gotta, make the fucking thing look like a Klingon. So at least you're gonna fake me into thinking it's a cool looking monster. And beyond that, though, Buffy had a lot of cool looking monsters.
Absolutely.
And Angel. Did you ever get into Angel?
I never watched Angel.
Angel is like really crappy for the first season and about the first season and a half, and then Joss Whedon really found his groove with that show and put together a really cool crew of some of them. There was like a psychic, a monster, Angel the vampire, and like the Giles-ish character named Wesley, who was like the I guess historian, monster historian, or supernatural historian, and it really the key characters really clicked. The psychic would get it was actually Cordelia from Buffy. She would get a vision, and the whole episode would be them trying to figure out what the vision represented and everything. And one of the key characters was a demon named Lorne, and Lorne was green with red horns, and he had red contacts in. And Lorne he was the character that would interrogate monsters to figure out what the vision was about. And the way Lorne could not read people's minds, but he could tell if they were lying or telling the truth by making them sing karaoke in his bar. So many scenes would take place in Lorne's bar with a giant fucking monster up there singing karaoke, and it's just the show just goes off the rails into that weird shit by about the third season, and I think it only went 4 or 5. They eventually brought Spike from Buffy over, and he had a pretty cool season. And I don't know, I actually, there's some really solid stuff on Angel that I think even surpassed the later stuff on Buffy that Joss didn't write himself.
Okay.
Why are we still talking about? We're still talking about pop culture.
Going back down these roads.
It's okay. It's okay. We're fine. All right. So you started getting rejections at 18, 19. You couldn't find your audience. Where did you find your audience at, MP Johnson? Well, first of all, why did you keep pushing? Like, what was inside you that made you say, I have to find my, why did it matter to you that you get published? Why did it matter to you that you did find the correct market to put your monster stories out into?
I think it didn't actually matter that much to me. I think it seemed like a natural progression. Like, I put all of this work into these stories. They should be seen, and I also want to see what the reaction is to them. So I want to see, are people, and I like that the concept of the transference of like images and ideas and stories. Like, I know what's in my brain with these stories. I want to see how much of that makes it into another person's brain and what they feel about what I put in their brain. This is an interesting, to me it's like it's 2 separate exercises, right? It's the exercise of writing a story, which is a super selfish act. It's like this act of creation for its own sake, and it's doing this awesome thing and getting lost in the world yourself. And then there's this separate act of like taking that creation and making it a certain way so that somebody else can absorb it and get something from it. And I love both of those as separate acts. So I started...
Go ahead. Don't let me stop you. I'll talk about myself all night long.
So at some point I was like, I don't know what I'm doing with this submission stuff, and like to some extent I still hold a grudge against my college for not going over the submissions process. I majored in creative writing. You would think that would be a thing that they tell you about, but whatever.
They don't fucking tell you anything, man. I've got a lot of friends that went through film school, man, and when they get out on the other side, there's no fucking. They just throw you fucking out into the world, and they're like, "Good luck," and they don't give you any You get a fucking film degree in the Midwest, and you're absolutely fucked in the ass. Like, there's nothing for you, and they never tell you that. They just take your money. I really I have such a love-hate relationship with academia because I love to learn, I love information, I love knowledge, and I love to acquire new skills. but the way the American school, like college system is set up is such a fucking racket, dude. They just want that motherfucking money, and they don't give a fuck what happens to you on the other side, save for several very specific types of jobs. If you're going to go be an engineer, they'll hook you right the fuck up. If you're going to go be a doctor or a nurse, oh my God, nurses have it. I don't want to say they have it easy, because the job itself is one of the hardest jobs on the planet.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I respect nurses more than just about any other vocation, and maybe that's why they get so much help. But if you go into nursing, you are basically handheld from the moment you walk in the door until the moment you're sitting at the fucking desk in the nurse's station at an emergency room. And maybe that's for the best, and maybe those are the types of jobs that should be easy to get, and because they're so hard and they're so demanding emotionally and physically. But if you go into the arts, you have nothing at the end. All you can hope for is to have professors that take it upon themselves to help you, that see something in you and take it upon themselves to say, hey, listen, man, come here and let me show you what to do. And I've had a few professors that way that have really helped try to push me in the right direction. I never take their advice because I'm a fucking bonehead. But I have had some that have been like, dude, you've got what it takes, so here, this is what you need to be doing to get you where you need to be. But they're few and far between.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like 15 years after graduating, I'm just now sort of starting to figure out the businessy side of writing. That would have been a nice couple of classes.
Well, I was actually shocked when we started talking and started becoming friends, and I would ask you questions about stuff, and knowing that you only published your first full-length book in was it 2012 or 2011 that Pork Knuckles came out?
Let's see. 2013.
2013.
Yeah.
But you've been writing for more than a decade. You've been writing
absolutely.
for 15 years, and that, I was like, oh my God, 15 years and you're just now putting out a book. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to get you on the show, and we have absolutely not talked about it at all, is the fact that you have gone through so much of the writing and submission process and actually watched the culture evolve from, like you said, having those market magazines that, unless you wanted to write science fiction or literary fiction, or maybe mysteries and crime. I guess crime fiction has always been one of those markets that that have been accessible, but I don't know about you, but I can't fucking stand a caper story. Get out of here with your fucking crime fiction.
I am sadly underread in crime fiction. There's one crime author that I love.
No, you're not missing anything. You're not missing anything. Who do you love?
Yeah. Andrew Vax.
I thought you were going to say...
I've never read Elmore Leonard.
Well, the only reason I started reading him was because when I was reading like how to write books, like how to write novels or how to do creative writing, and I saw him cited 5 or 6 times for being the best dialogue writer in the business. So I bought some of his books just to catch up on his dialogue writing, and it's as advertised, it's great.
Absolutely.
Not a caper fan though. Get out of here with your capers.
Get out of here with your capers. Yeah.
So you keep going, MP Johnson. You just kept going.
Yeah.
When did you start to feel that success? When did that success start to...
I don't know if I felt that yet.
Well, but you started getting...
I started getting...
I keep leaning out of the frame here because my fucking cat won't quit meowing unless I pet him. He's laying here on the bed next to me, and I have to reach over and give him some loving every once in a while.
Gotcha.
Or he's going to keep interrupting us. But go ahead. When did you first start getting published?
Well, so here's the time frame. So I started, after submitting and getting rejections, I was like, and I'm in the whole punk rock thing too. So I decided about 97 or so, 97, 98, to just put out a zine. So I put out Freak Tension, and that had like band interviews, music reviews, and I always threw a short story in there,
Threw some monsters into it.
Yeah, exactly.
How did the punk scene? Because I've never been a fan of punk rock. I don't like the aggression as much, because I kind of got out of metal too after a certain point where it's just like I feel like while maybe metal has more negativity in its aggression, punk rock is really aggressive. It's more chaotic aggression, and I never really felt connected to the chaotic aggression of punk rock. But I love the way punk rock promotes itself. I've always loved the grassroots way, the homegrown, do-it-yourself way that punk rock has always kept itself right in your face, no matter how little mainstream attention it got. It's always there, and it will always be there. How did that audience, how did that chaotic aggression, how did they respond to your monster stories?
I got a good response. Like, people were into it. I would get, I'd get emails, and, well, when I started using email, I'd get emails like, when's the next issue coming out, that sort of thing. You got positive reviews. There's the bigger punk rock scenes like Punk Planet and Flipside and Maximum Rock and Roll, and I got good reviews in all of those. But I think that, like, I've always really been informed by the DIY aspect of punk rock. Just do it yourself. If you've got something cool that you want to put out there, just do it yourself. Do whatever needs to be done to get it done. And then just the community aspect of, like, hanging out and the social element. And
I've always made fun of punk rock by saying, if you want to be a successful punk rock band, you got to record an album in your basement and then get into a fight and break up. Because it seems like the most revered punk bands are bands that barely stayed together long enough to put one album out.
It's true. It's true. And it's, I think that becomes more and more the case. Is like, it's getting to this weird place in punk rock now where old bands are reuniting, and it's this whole, like, festival circuit where bands reunite for old punks and stuff. But there are still those handful of bands that, like, they'll never reunite. Minor Threat's never going to reunite, and, like, they're, like, revered so much after 30 songs or whatever they put out in their day. But yeah, so I think that the punk rock thing really fuels, and it also fuels, like, what I'm writing. Like, a lot of the scenes in my stories, and in Pork Knuckles, of course, there's the big finale at the punk rock show, and characters are in bands and stuff. So it's definitely influences what I do.
Well, I want to backtrack a little bit, because when I was describing the difference between metal and punk, you kind of cocked your head like you disagreed completely with what I had to say. Don't let my dumbass dictate the course of the conversation. If you want to describe in your words what punk rock is to you, besides the DIY aspect, if you disagree with my description as being chaotically aggressive, please feel free to jump in and correct me.
I don't think that I necessarily disagree with punk being chaotically aggressive, but I feel like metal is also chaotically aggressive. There's like, you go to a punk show and you go to a metal show, and there's, like, differences in audiences, but at the best shows in each genre, people are just going nuts.
For sure.
Like the circle pits. Strangely, sometimes I think that people going off at punk rock shows is somewhat more organized and less chaotic than at metal shows. You've got your circle pit at the hardcore shows where everyone's just running in a circle. And I was at like a super moshy hardcore show last night where, like, everybody forms a circle, and then the people do their, like, ninja mosh and their kicks and shit, and there's more of a semblance of organization, whereas at some metal show it's just like, bumper cars, people just running into each other and just stupid bouncing off of each other.
For sure.
But it's like different flavors of chaos is really what it is.
Definitely. I've actually found over the last few years, I've really settled into fantasy metal as the thing that I listen to more often than anything, because there's such a positive, uplifting attitude, not only to the music, not only to the lyrics, of, like, a band like Dragon Force, or a band like Hammerfall, for example, or just tons of different examples of it. Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
but the music itself is like it's not, you know, you've got your doom metal and your black metal and all that stuff, goth metal, but that stuff really has like that stuff brings me down, where I feel like fantasy metal lifts me up every day and sends me into battle. Manowar, you know, as an example. Like if I get up in the morning and listen to Manowar, you know, I've just had William Wallace from Braveheart fucking, you know, give me a speech to send me off into my day, and that's where I've settled into that, and that scene is still really alive in Europe, but here it's totally dead. There's just really hard to find that type of atmosphere in American metal.
Yeah, there's a lot of it going on in Europe. But, you know, they tour over here, and like their shows are well attended. Do you listen to Sabaton?
Yeah, Sabaton is fucking funny, dude.
Oh my god,
I love
that
Sabaton.
band. Like every time they come to town, I go see them, and it's just like the most amazing, triumphant live show. Like everyone's singing along, and the singer of that band has like the most brilliant gestures, and it's just like, just like powerful. He's got this weird vest and his aviator glasses and his cool mohawk.
He's got a great voice too. He's got a super distinct voice. Yeah,
now we're talking about
metal. I haven't got to see Sabaton live, but one of my favorite live acts was Rammstein when they were at their most popular in America. Because they had Rammstein they don't really have like a negative attitude. They were kind of just like just like weird metal. But their live shows were so funny, and and it's subtle humor. You really have to be paying attention to what's actually going on stage while they're setting everything on fire. They make a big they make a huge joke about accidentally setting themselves on fire and dying every time. And it's the first time I saw them, for example, the first tour they came through with the Family Values tour with Korn and Limp Bizkit and Ice Cube and Mindless Self-Indulgence, and then Rammstein. That was, I think, the 5 major acts on the bill. So the lead singer came out in a trench coat, and the trench coat catches on fire, and he sings Du Hast, their big single at the time.
Yeah.
And there's fire going on everywhere. So fast forward to the second tour, they do a solo headlining tour in smaller venues. That was a huge arena tour. So they come through in a small tour, and the lead singer's now shaved his hair into a mohawk. And in their video, I forget which song was the single off that second record, but he wears these big glasses, has a mohawk, and he's still got his trench coat on in the video as he's singing. So he comes out, and they start doing Du Hast, and he comes out in his trench coat with his mohawk and his glasses, like the video, and he catches on fire. The trench coat catches on fire like it does during their first tour, but this time the fire catches up on his head, and his mohawk catches on fire. And these guys, and it's like a science lab. It's like a mad scientist lab is the stage show, like the stage decoration, and so all the stagehands are dressed in lab coats, so they look like scientists. So these 2 guys run out, and they go to spray him with fire retardant and catch him all on fire. He goes up in flames and starts flailing around and falls on the ground, and in the audience we're just like, what the fuck is happening? And they run off the stage again, grab another. They're like, the fire extinguisher isn't working. They're like shaking the fire extinguishers. They throw them down, they go get other ones, they put them all out, and he stands up and reaches behind him and takes this whole flame retardant apparatus off that had a mask, a sculpted mask of his face with a mohawk on it and glasses. Takes it all off, and now there's his regular mohawk, no fire, no nothing, and he's wearing like a sleeveless shirt under it and everything. Throws that all off to the side and continues the show. And it's just that kind of like, you think we're going to catch ourselves on fire because all we do is blow stuff up, and so they would catch their guitars on fire and have to throw them down and have new guitars brought out to them, and just all kinds of dumb shit like that. And it was all done like, it was like really subtle comedy like that, where you had to be really aware and like pick up on the fact that they are totally self-aware of how dangerous their show is. It was a lot of fun, and we're not talking about Impey Johnson's career at all anymore. So you started putting out your zine, Freak Tension. You got a lot of good response off of it, and and did that continue to grow? Freak Tension got bigger and better as time went on?
I think it got better. It didn't really get much bigger. It really depended on how much money I had at the time. Like I tried to work with record labels to get ads to kind of pay for it, but I wasn't very good at business at the time, so that didn't work out. And plus I was kind of, I wasn't. One year I would put out one issue, and then another year I'd put out 4 issues, and then 3 years would pass and I'd put out one issue, and then 2 years, and that's kind of how it's been. I just put out the 15th issue just a couple years ago.
But the whole time you're writing. The whole time you're writing stories.
Always writing. Always writing.
And at what point did you, or have you yet, come to the conclusion that this is a career? Writing is a career. This is what I want to do with my life.
I've always known that I wanted writing to be my career. So, and I've always written toward that. So, like, it's, over the last 10 years or so, that started to be realized. This year is the 10th anniversary of my first published short story, which was in a magazine called Kapfalter, which is the German word for the basket that the head falls into when the head comes off in the guillotine.
Okay.
And so 10 years ago, the first short story came out, and I had this idea that, I can just publish short stories, and then someday, magically out of the blue, someone will contact me and say, well, I'm going to put out a collection of your short stories. But that didn't happen, so I started working on longer stuff and eventually came up with something cool, and Pork Knuckles Malone came out.
So how many stories have you had published between your first story that got published in the basket and Pork Knuckles? Did you get a lot? Have you had a lot of short fiction published in that time?
I think it was like 30 stories, 30, 40 stories, something like that.
That's a good fucking healthy group of short stories, and I think that
it's not bad.
I think that a lot of writers today they won't take the time to do that. A lot of writers today don't have time for that shit. They want to go right to being a novelist. They want to go right to having a long work put out. And I see a lot of people get real cunty about publishing short fiction. Like, I think writers in this era demand more out of a published short story market than just being glad that they got a fucking short story published. And there's money that comes along with it, and there's the attitude of never publish anything for free, always get paid for it. You go back and forth. I think that brand new writers, they have a lot of dues to pay, and if somebody likes your stuff and publishes it in something that you don't necessarily get paid for, I don't think it's a bad thing. My first published short story was free. I didn't get paid anything for it, but a copy of the book. And that's a whole other thing where you get paid, but you don't get a copy of the book. The market, the anthology or whatever it is, magazine, they want you to use the money they paid you to buy a copy of the book or the magazine or what have you. All of it is to say that, there are levels and there's dues that need to be paid. And I think that writers today don't think that they have to pay dues for as long, or like I said, I see a lot of cunty stuff going on in Facebook groups where people don't think that they get enough from their short story. You published my short story, but you didn't give me 5 copies of the magazine, and you only paid me 1/4 cent a word, and it took 6 months for the thing to come out. So, and then they go on tirades and they tell people not to, this is a scam market. It's a scam. It's a scam. I hate when people refer to writing markets as scams, because nobody's getting rich off of your fucking 3,000 word story that took you a day and a half to write. I'm sorry, but a scam is something that people profit off of.
Right. And it's not a scam if they're upfront about the fact that they're not going to pay you.
Right.
And let me also add.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Let me also add that money doesn't mean shit. Like I have been paid for short stories that nobody has fucking read because either the publisher went under before it got published, or it didn't go anywhere. I value way more a publisher that's going to put out a book or a magazine and you know they're going to spend time getting people to read that shit, that's more valuable. If that book gets into 300 hands and 3 people read that short story, that's more valuable than a penny a word to me.
And for me personally, when I have a lot of faith in a book, and I think that this thing might sell. It's a good anthology. It's a good premise. It's got a cool cover on it. The guys putting it out are working hard. I know nobody's making money. Nobody's making fucking money putting out anthologies. I'm sorry, but nobody's buying cars and houses and fucking you over by putting out anthologies. They're just not. So a lot of times, if the pay is low enough, I waive it. I say, thank you for accepting my story. Go ahead and keep the payment and put it towards the promotion of the book. Because like you just said, the fact that the thing gets published and gets out into people's hands and people read your story is 1,000 times more important than $10. What the fuck is $10? For me, $10 is something they could keep and spend towards the promotion of the book. When they're ready to pay me and the transaction's complete, they accept the story. They ask me, all right, what's your address so we can ship the book, and what's your payment? Do you want a check or do you want a PayPal payment for the story? I give them my address for the book, and I tell them go ahead and keep the money, because to me it's way more valuable that the book gets read and that they put that hard work into it and saw it to completion. Now there are projects I've been a part of that my story's been accepted and the thing never came out. Is it frustrating? Yeah. Sure, it can be frustrating. But if you're writing so few stories that one fucking story that's still hanging out there in the world, that maybe it's been a year, maybe it's been a year and a half, and oh my God, they still have the rights to my story, and I signed a contract and now I can't get my story back. It's my story. I worked so hard on it. You worked for a day and a half, and it's one story. You should have 200 stories.
I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this because this is something that this shocked me when I was sending out my invites and stuff for people to submit to Strange Fucking Stories too. I spend a lot of time on each short story, well over a day and a half, but I have backlogs of 90% of my short stories will never get published just because there's not the quantity of publishers to publish it. Anybody asks me for a story, I just go through the files. I've got hundreds of them. And
publishers listening right now, MP Johnson needs a short story collection a year released. I'm telling you right now, this guy is a fucking genius, and it's a crime that there aren't collections of MP Johnson stories. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. But I guess, in communicating with writers, it had never come up before, and I just assumed that most writers had a similar backlog of short stories, and it was just a matter of me saying, hey, send over one of your weird short stories, and we're all set. And I learned that that's not the case. Not every writer has a great backlog of short stories.
And it's I think it's part of this culture of, well, if I have to write short stories, I'll write them one at a time. I'll write them exactly what the anthology or magazine theme is, and you better get back to me soon because I don't have time to fuck around. I need to get my novel put out. And it's this I want to show you guys something. A lot of you guys know my history in Strange House as being I self-published those books, and you didn't see a lot of activity from me before that time. So suddenly here comes this jack-off out of nowhere, self-publishing, and now he stands up on these fucking soapboxes and talks about all the time and effort that you need to put in order to be published, whereas I don't have these stories of spending years and years and years submitting short fiction. I don't have that, but I want to show you what the fuck I do have. Give me just 1 second.
Sure. Now we're just watching as Kevin Strange organizes his apartment. Scripts.
This is just the stuff that I've kept over the years when I was still writing in notebooks. Now, mind you, I have dozens of stories written and half-finished books at 25 and 35,000 words in length that only exist as files on computers and in emails. But when I was still writing in notebooks, this is just a small selection, and these are full. These books, these notebooks are absolutely full of half-formed scripts, of half-finished short stories, I have spent a decade of my life sitting in front of notebooks, writing fiction and writing scripts for films. I mean, this is a fucking, this is like 30 fucking notebooks right here worth of shit. And again, there's about, at least as much writing as there is here in digital form as well. So
I think this goes back to what I was saying earlier about the two separate things, the writing and the publishing. Like, everything I write for fun. I write short stories. I don't write short stories with the expectation that they're going to get published. I write them because I love to write them. And, so what if only 10% of them ever end up getting published? I had a blast with each short story that I wrote. Same thing with books. I've got, as I've gotten into books, like, I've just thrown away a bunch of books because I think they're garbage and I haven't even bothered to submit them. And there are some good ones that just probably wouldn't make sense anywhere.
So let's talk about the first book. So you write the fuck out of short stories. You love monster fiction. You've gotten 30 or so stories published over the years. And now you start writing longer stuff. And like you just said, you wrote stuff and tossed it, didn't think it was good enough. What was it about Pork Knuckles that really made you follow it through to completion and start sending it out to publishers?
Oddly enough, Pork Knuckles started out as a short story, and I just saw that there could be more world to it. And I took that approach, and I just kept building onto this world, and it turned into this thing that I felt was like very reminiscent of like the trauma stuff that I love, and it's got this story of the kid and the pig. I thought it was worth sending out, so I sent it to a few places, and Bizarro Pulp Press was just kind of getting started at the time, and they were into it, and they took it, and it was nominated for a Wonderland Book Award.
Fuck yeah, it was. I was gunning for it to win too. The Wonderland Book Award is the award given once a year to the best Bizarro fiction published in a given year. It's a big award for us as Bizarros, and MP Johnson, you and I actually traveled to BizarroCon this year, and
yeah.
Didn't you say that you've been to quite a few?
That was my third, I think.
It was my first, and one of the things that ended up happening, I couldn't for the fucking life of me find a ride from the airport to the venue, beforehand. I was talking to people hitting up BizarroCon, and there was nobody arriving on the day I was arriving, or picking people up the day that I was arriving, and it turns out that MP Johnson here and Bradley Sands were both coming in within an hour of my flight landing, and so the three of us we met up at the airport at BizarroCon, and we rented MP Johnson rented a car and was gracious enough to drive Bradley and myself down to the show. And I gotta tell you, man, I talked to MP Johnson through Facebook and emails, and then he was on the show briefly here, but meeting him in person was just, immediately I knew he was a good dude. Without any hesitation. I mean, the guy was super friendly, and we got along great the whole weekend, and he's just a swell fucking guy to be around. And you can just sort of tell, some people are good people, some people are bad people, and some people are bad people masquerading as good people. And MP Johnson is just a chill fucking fellow who just I don't know, good person to be around. I right away from the moment we got together and all the times we got to talk at the show, I had a lot of fun, and it felt like as weird as it felt like I was hanging out with an old buddy, not somebody that I had just met. I really felt from the first moment that he walked up and we started talking. He was wearing a Danzig shirt that matched his shoes, and we just started talking about our Danzig hoodie that matched his shoes, and we just started talking about Danzig and started talking about this and that, and it felt like I was talking to an old friend. And all through the weekend, it felt the same way. Like we'd run into each other and hang out. I'd be like, I've known this guy for like collectively like 45 minutes, and he feels like he's been my buddy for years.
Totally, it was weird. Usually it takes me a while to like warm up and be able to have a good conversation with someone, but like you and I, it was just like boom, we were right into it. So a high five.
Yeah, virtual high five. AOL Instant Messenger high five. All right, so that shit worked out for you. You got nominated for first book out. You're a Wonderland Award nominee. The BizarroCon that we went to was the year that the winners were announced, and man, I was gunning for you the whole time, man. I voted for you, and I was really hoping you were going to nail that thing, because I know a lot of other people are big MP Johnson fans, and we also had Danger Slater for collection. So there were my friends were represented really well at this year's BizarroCon, and it was a ton of fun, man. It was a great experience. And that actually, I don't know how you felt about it, but the actual award ceremony, I didn't think anything of until we were actually there and seated, and Rose gave her speech, and the winners were announced and gave their speeches. It moved me, dude. I felt like, oh my God, this is like the epicenter of our genre. This is like, these guys are really being awarded recognition from their peers from all over the world.
Recognition from their peers for something that they have worked their asses off on. You know what I mean? And like both Garrett and Brian Allen Carr's their acceptance speeches, I got chills, because it's like these are guys who have been like devoted to this shit, and nobody's more deserving of awards than people who like just work their asses off on this. In the grand scheme of things, this is pretty obscure shit, and they do it because they love it.
Well, that's the thing, man, and that's what we talked about. What we've been talking about this whole show is this genre just hasn't been represented in fiction. There's a huge decade-long gap in the type of fiction that should have been out there.
Yeah.
And now here we are, and none of us are getting rich off of it. None of us are, there's no way to there's no fucking way to exploit bizarro fiction. You don't get into bizarro fiction for the reason you get into young adult dystopian trilogies. You know what I mean?
No, this is the shit that like 15, 20 years from now, people are going to look back and they're going to be like, holy shit, this Carlton Melick shit, and like they're going to start digging into all this shit, and like then maybe it will get some attention. But there's no way. It's not for this moment to like, there's the select few that get it and are into it, but it's not going to get big, right? Anytime soon.
Right. So to see those people that work so hard and are so dedicated to filling this gap in literature, to see them get recognized, and to see just how the thing is about BizarroCon, man, is all of us are weirdos, and most of us are isolated in our little areas where we are, and we don't get support by a lot of people around us. No. And it's a gathering of people that just, like the way you and I clicked at the show, it's like I clicked like that with a bunch of people that were suddenly like not best friends, but you know what I mean? Like we all get it before we even get there. We all get it. We all know why we're there. We all know what we're into. We all know why we have this burning passion and desire to fill this gap in literature. And for all of us to gather around and recognize the best of the best in weird fiction by a huge room of weirdos.
Yeah.
It moved me to tears, dude. I had tears in my eyes while Garrett was giving his speech, because Garrett's one of the weirdest motherfuckers I've ever met. And you can't put that guy in any room where he feels comfortable except for the room he was in that night.
Right. And he's a fucking genius. He's like an absurdly intelligent person.
God, yes.
Who writes these bonkers stories. It's insane.
God, yes. I love BizarroCon, man. I've been planning. I've been
Yeah.
getting ready for BizarroCon since the last day of BizarroCon.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Um,
Like, oh, I need to do it again.
and
There
we
should
get
be
to
two
do a
of
little.
them.
We get to do a little mini version of it here in 2 weeks. You and I get
Oh,
to
yeah?
do the Bizarro Hour in Chicago, Illinois, at a comic book store, no less.
Yeah.
Um, that's
Gmart Comics. It's going
yeah.
to be a blast.
It's going to be you and me, Gmart Comics, downtown Chicago, Saturday night. What is it? The 27th? Is that the night?
28th.
The 28th.
Saturday the
Um,
28th.
it's you and me and Andy DiFranceca and
Yep.
John Bruni and
Yep.
Michael Allen Rose and I'm forgetting one name. Justin.
Justin Grimble.
And is that it? Is that all of us?
That sounds about right. We're probably missing somebody, but I can't remember.
I actually did Bizarro Hour before BizarroCon. My first Bizarro Hour was last January, and it was same type of thing, very very much smaller. It only lasted I was only there with the Bizarros for maybe 4 hours, but I felt that sense of belonging, and with that crew where we all knew we were weirdos and we were happy to be around each other. And you and me, we get to do that in 2 weeks. And I have a cool story. I'm going to read from Slug Butts, which was published on BizarroCentral.com. And I didn't realize until after Slug Butts was published that one MP Johnson had actually had a slug story published on Bizarro Central years before I did. Tell us,
dude. If you're gonna read your slug story, I should read my slug story too.
You should. We should have some kind of a slug theme going. Let's do it.
Totally.
Let's read our slug stuff together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So Pork Knuckles Malone comes out. It gets nominated for a Wonderland Award,
Yep.
and out of nowhere, I see a post from Eraserhead Press. After this was obviously before this year's BizarroCon.
Right.
After I'd read Pork Knuckles, after we'd published you in several anthologies, and after we'd become friends, I see a post from Eraserhead Press that a brand new MP Johnson book is coming out called Dungeons and Drag Queens. And it's got a phenomenal cover, and it's called Dungeons and Drag Queens. Let's get into this book. Where did this come from? What was the motivation to put out Dungeons and Drag Queens? Something that, the thing about Bizarro, when you see great Bizarro, it's always, fuck, why didn't I think of that?
Right.
Why hasn't somebody else thought of that? Why hasn't somebody else thought of that? And Dungeons and Drag Queens was the perfect blend, the perfect matchup that I've never seen done before. It was just like one of these duh moments. They fit together so well. Tell us how that came about.
Interestingly enough, to step back first to the Minotaur discussion, the original title of Dungeons and Drag Queens was Miniskirts and Minotaur Skulls, because the Minotaur skull plays an important role in that book.
Yes, it does.
So
there are no dungeons.
There's not a single. Well, there's like a cave sort of thing that could kind of be called a dungeon.
But there is a dragon.
There's a dragon, sky serpent. But anyway, so yeah, I guess I love the concept. So, two things. I love the art of drag, and I love epic, like sword and sorcery, Conan style fiction. And I thought it would be a blast to take that genre, and it's such a testosterone heavy genre, a lot of chest beating and sword swinging, and instead of your standard barbarian, why not have a drag queen as the main character? I thought that would lead to some interesting scenarios.
Now,
that was the impetus.
Did this idea originally come as a short story idea, or was the idea to novelize it intentional from the start?
That was always intended to be a novella.
And did you write the book before you pitched it to Eraserhead, or did you pitch it first and then write it?
I wrote it before I pitched it. The whole I still am not the pitch thing to me is really difficult because I abandon projects that don't make me happy as I'm writing them. Like my primary goal is I have fun doing this writing, and the concept of pitching a bunch of things and then having someone pick one and then tell me that I have to write that one takes a lot of the fun out of it for me.
Suddenly it becomes a responsibility. Now
It's very much like the writing that I do at my day job. Like, here, I'm going to tell you what to write. And that's not so much fun for me. I'm the sort of writer who, okay, I just woke up with this weird idea about a tentacle story, and I'm going to spend all day, outlining and getting the first couple of chapters written. I'm not the kind of writer who can say, I'm going to put together some pitches for a book that I may be writing in 6 months to a year from now. So I had written the book before I pitched it to Eraserhead, and lucked out. They liked the pitch that I gave them, and they took the book, and I worked with Kevin Donaghy over there and did some editing, and out it came.
All right, so how long was the writing process? Did you write this over the course of years, months, days, a couple hours?
My writing process is kind of is absurd. So what I do is I write a first draft, and my first draft is always pretty sloppy. It's where I just let the ideas pour out onto the paper. And that's the first draft is my draft. It's like that's where I get everything that I love and all of the crazy ideas out onto paper. And then I put the first draft aside for like a month or a couple of months, and then I come back to it when I'm feeling it, and then I start getting into the rewriting. So I mean, any given book of mine takes a minimum of I've been working on it for at least 8 months probably, just going back and forth between rewriting and the original draft.
How many hours a day do you spend writing, or is it a daily thing for you?
It's a daily thing. It's lately I've been working on these editing projects, so I haven't been doing enough of my own writing, but typically, like, my day job is writing, so I write about 8 hours at my day job, and then I switch over to weirdo mode, and I spend another hour or 2 or 3 writing weird stuff. So it's a lot of writing.
That day job, is that from home? Do you do your work from home, or do you?
Yeah, I work from home. I work from home most days, which is nice. I go into the office once in a while, but mostly just hang out here on my couch.
You just spend the majority of your time writing something.
Yeah. That's my weekdays. I'm spending a lot of time writing.
And then do you take the weekend off altogether?
Usually I do some writing on the weekends too, but I try and cram it in like the morning so I can have more fun.
And what is the 8 hours of writing for your day job? Is that nonfiction copy? Are you writing copy for websites, or what is it exactly?
Yeah, I'm writing copy for websites, specifically copy for lawyers' websites, oddly enough, which is interesting.
Now, does that require any kind of knowledge of law, or are you just writing, how does that work?
It doesn't require knowledge of the law, but it's like, I feel like any good writing, whether it be, my day job sort of stuff or weird stuff, requires you to be a sponge. So for my day job, I need to talk to my lawyer clients and just find out what they're about, what they do on a day-to-day basis, and then spew that out onto the page for them.
Is it, are you writing actual contracts, legal documents, or are you writing something else?
It's more like, if you go to a lawyer's website, it says something like, "Have you been hurt in an accident? Call us to help you get compensation." I
We
read a
have
lot of
this.
stuff.
We have these guys here called Brown and Crouppen
Yeah.
that do stuff in Missouri, and one of the guys has an eye patch, and they are everywhere. They're the aggressive lawyers that go after like the ambulance chaser guys. They're
Yep.
just like, have you been hurt on the job? Have you been in an accident? Whatever. If you're fucked up in any way, we're about to get you some money, son.
Yep.
Uh,
That's what I
that's,
do. I write that sort of stuff.
that's cool. That's cool. It's a cool day job. How long have you been doing that?
Like 10 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
10 years as a doing nonfiction copy during the day, and then a huge catalog of fiction at night. You're a fucking writer, bona fide, all day long, for fucking real writer. Writing,
Yeah, yeah.
writing, writing.
Yeah, I feel like when I say that I'm a writer, it's no joke. It's like, it's for sure.
Do you have a writing desk, or do you just chill on the couch with a laptop?
Oddly enough, I do my day job writing on the couch on the laptop, but when I do my serious weirdo writing, I've got my workstation over there. Uh, but I do a lot of like, I move around. I use my space. I'll be like, I'll do revisions over on that chair or in the bedroom, or on the floor or something, or scribbling in notebooks. Try to, I don't want to wear out any one particular seat.
So what would you say? 12 solid hours a day writing?
I'd say at least. I'd say probably 10 is more reasonable.
Any writers watching this program, if you don't have 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours a day to devote to writing, listen to this gentleman right here. This is a fucking writer. This is a professional writer telling you how many hours a day he spends. No excuses, and absolutely no, like I said, he's been doing it for a decade, and he doesn't sound like he's the least bit burnt out or concerned about the amount of writing that he does. I mean, if you're gonna write, you fucking write. If you're a writer, you write fiction, right, M.P. Johnson?
It's what you do. It comes down to your motivation. Like, if this is what you do, this is not a question. Like, there was no choice in my life where I said, "Oh, I'm going to be a writer." This is just what I've done since I was a kid. I've written shit, and it's just, I guess I don't know what else I would do. Before I got this day job writing, I worked in miserable factories and call centers and stuff, but I was still writing after and before and on weekends.
My favorite is during. I used to work I used to work as a manager of a movie theater and assistant manager. I didn't have to do the money or anything. My primary duty at the movie theater was to, when they still put film on reels, was to go upstairs in the where the projector room, which takes the entire front, side to side of the entire movie theater. You walk in, it goes into two wings, and you go into your theaters, and above them obviously are the projectors. So that there's this giant room, long, real skinny, long room that's just got the projectors in it. And back in before digital, there were giant projectors with these platters next to the projectors, and someone had to go upstairs and feed the film. The film is delivered on trucks in canisters, and you would have it called reels, and you would have 6 to 7 reels that built one particular film. And you've seen Fight Club, you know the whole idea of the cigarette burn up in the corner. The cigarette burn is the on-screen representation of where each reel meets, and you have to do that on a splicer. So you have this little machine that you put the tail of reel 1 onto the head of reel 2, and you drop this thing down, and it drops tape onto the fucking film, and then you spool that onto the reel and connect the tail of 2 to the head of 3, and you build your film that way, and then thread it all through the projector run it through once to make sure you didn't do anything upside down. Everything's fucking kosher, and the film works properly, and that's how you build a film. You get usually 4 to 8 brand new films every Thursday. So my Thursday shift was building the films, and then the rest of the week it was just a matter of going upstairs and threading them all into each projector. So if you have 12 movies, the showtimes are all set up to where each movie starts playing 5 to 10 minutes after one another, and then it drops. The film drops off the projector back onto the platter, and there's usually a 30-minute to 45-minute break, and then the whole thing starts again. Well, during that 30 to 45 minutes is when the guy goes upstairs, the film dude, and threads all the projectors so that he can then go by at the start times and press the start button on each of the projectors. You get the idea?
Yeah.
So my job was to go up there, thread the fucking movies, and start them all for their start times. So I got good enough and fast enough at threading these projectors that it would take me less than 5 minutes to thread number 1 through number 12, which would give me an hour and a half to fuck around up in the projector booth, and I would bring notebooks with me, and I would write stories and movie scripts up there on the clock, getting paid next to nothing.
Yeah.
Just barely it was barely over minimum wage, but I would do the majority of my writing at work, getting paid on the clock, and then when I went home I could do other things, which a lot of time consisted of taking the notebooks and transcribing them into the computer so that I could do the final draft of my movies and whatnot. But that's my favorite method of writing is writing at a day job.
Awesome.
So you get paid twice.
Yeah. But that's the thing. You find time. You find time.
Yeah. There's no excuse. If you're a writer, you write. There's always time. Right. We're at the 2-hour mark, MP Johnson, but there was a really important topic I wanted to discuss. Do you want to save it for next time, or do you want to go into it? If you feel like going into it?
We could dig in.
All right, we're gonna go. We're now the bonus round. I'm literally fighting with my cat now. My cat, he's in this fucking mood where he's got this fucking look in his eye where he wants attention. This is his time.
Is this done yet? Am I going to? When do you ask me questions?
Exactly. This is his time. He gets attention right now, and so he keeps jumping on the bed and meowing in my face while I try to talk to you. And when I shoo him away, I'm over here with this pillow, shooing the cat away, and then he just pops right back up and starts meowing in my face. So we're on Rocco time now. So if you see me start throwing stuff at him, that's what you're seeing. He and I battle. Right. We fight a lot. All right, I'll get this away from my pile of dirty clothes. All right, good enough. Nope, that's my dirty clothes.
I want to see a body like erupt from the pile of clothes now.
I wish there was a body back there. There's a really important topic that I wanted to discuss. So we're now in bonus hour 2, or hour 3. I have recently. You mentioned earlier you're working on the new Strange House Books anthology, Strange Fucking Stories Part 2, correct?
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
I recently sent you a story, and I'm also working with another editor on another anthology project. And this past weekend, or late in the week, I got some extensive story notes from both of you guys about the projects that I'm working on. And as I work through my own nonsense with the story notes, it occurred to me that this would be a great conversation to have because we get a lot of listeners who are just coming up in the writing game and are making a lot of the same amateur mistakes that we all make. And like you mentioned early in your career, when you were sending monster stories to literary magazines, your attitude was, "How dare you tell me that my thing isn't the best thing? Of course my thing is the best thing." And
yeah, totally.
So I want to talk a little bit about that process, both as an editor and as a writer, because I also recently had one of my writer friends send me a draft of a story he was working on for an upcoming anthology, and I sent him back very extensive notes in the same vein that you did to me for my story. And he is has a lot smaller of an ego than I do, so he always accepts my notes without question. And not that he uses everything that I tell him to use, but it's never a question of. I recently read. It was a quote that I heard, and I forget what show I heard it on, but who's the writer of Infinite Jest?
Pinchon? No, that's the other thing.
This is important, so I usually don't take a fact check break to Google something.
Is it David Foster Wallace?
David Foster Wallace.
Yeah.
I recently heard a quote that, or maybe I saw it on Facebook, that when his editor would send him notes, maybe he would send him a page of notes, he would send back dozens of pages of argumentative response about why the note is bad and why the note is absurd and has no business, those changes have no business taking place in his books. And that's probably one of the reasons why Infinite Jest is like 20,000 pages long, or however ridiculously long. I mean, that's a huge fucking book, because he's so passionate about his vision for his book. Now, David Foster Wallace is considered one of the best modern literary authors, so he's an argument for leave him the fuck alone and just let him do his shit. He's a genius, right?
Sure.
But we're not all geniuses. In fact, most of us are very flawed, and most of us get stuck in our heads, and we don't see, even though the big picture is our own, it's our story, it's in our world, it's our universe, it's our language.
Yeah.
We don't see the big picture all the time. We get lost in the details, and it takes someone else from outside coming in and saying, hey, bonehead, why don't you do this? You missed an opportunity to do this thing right here that's going to help clearly establish character A, or help fill in the some details, color in some details on character B that he may be like sketched in, but you don't really have him filled in all the way. Why not just drop this little convenient thing right here and fix that up? And as an editor, when I'm doing that for my friends, it's always done with the attitude of, I love what you've done, because I won't bother. I'm sorry, but I've sent a lot of people a smiley face and a this is cool, because it's not cool, bro. It's not cool at all. And I'm never gonna. A lot of people like to criticize negatively. I have never been a negative critic. I do not tear someone apart and tell them what they've done wrong. If there's enough wrong in a manuscript that it bears like a critique about the wrongness, it's going to get a smiley face, cool story, bro. What's the point of I'm only going to focus and I'm only going to give my attention to a story or a book that I believe has enough potential that it will be successful, or that it will be published. Or, if I'm editing an anthology, then I'm only going to bother sending story notes to a story that I want, but I want some work done to it. If it's so bad that I have to break this author's heart by telling him everything that's wrong with it, it just gets a rejection. Or if it's just a buddy that's sending me something and saying, what do you think of this? If there's enough wrong with it that I have to break this guy's heart and tear his thing apart, then I'm just going to say, oh, it was cool. Was there anything I could change? No, dude, it's awesome. Now, if I see the potential in something, then we'll get into it. And I recently did that with a friend where I said, I really like this character. I love the attitude. I love the voice you've given him, and I love the type of fiction, this particular type of fiction that you wrote it in. There's a lot of different types of stories that I really like in this vein, but you've missed opportunities to do some things here. Why not add this element? Why not do this? Why not have this character be this? And really flush this thing out another 1,200 or 1,500 words or whatever. In some cases, it's cut this out. Or it's, why not add this ending? For this particular story, I was so bold, M.P. Johnson, as to suggest an ending for it that it didn't have. Why? Because I felt like there was a missed opportunity to do a bookend from something that's described and talked about in the first paragraph that never gets mentioned again. Why not add it to the last paragraph and give the resolution to the thing you set the story up with? And the author, like I said, he has he takes criticism and takes suggestions and story notes much better than I do. And so he built this beautiful story that started off good and ended up, I think, really, really cool. not necessarily because I had anything to do with the suggestions, but because he sent it to someone, and because someone offered suggestions, and he
Right.
took them well. Before I'm going to hand this off to you for a while and get your opinion, but I want to talk about the exact opposite. One of the very first books, I'm not going to say which one, I'm not going to say who, it doesn't matter, it's not a big deal. One of the first stories that I ever accepted for first novels that I ever accepted for Strange House, I did so, I was dumb, young in the game, didn't have experience as an editor. I accepted the book sight unseen based on the title and premise. I loved the title and premise. I thought it was awesome. I offered a contract right up front. I got the contract back with the manuscript. Oh my God, the manuscript was terrible. It was clear that this manuscript was rushed. The idea was great. The title was great, but this book needed 3 or 4 more drafts before it was anything I would ever consider publishing. And I can't do that. For whatever reason, it's not in me to be harsh and critical in that way. I did do my best to offer the author some notes about how to change the ending and how to change the third act and some other things throughout the story that would help it. But even then, it would have been a compromise in quality for what I would later accept as a book worthy of being considered a Strange House book. And I committed the worst crime as an editor that I've ever committed, and I've sworn to myself I will never do it again. When I sent the notes out for a suggestion to change the third act and to change things throughout the story that would make it better, but not great, but better, the author sent me back an email saying, no, I don't want to change anything. I like it just how it is. And I said, oh, okay. And I published the fucking book as is. And I regret it. To this day, I regret it, because as an editor, it is your job to do quality control. And in this case, as a dumbass, I sent this contract out without reading the fucking manuscript because I assumed wrongly that people write good books. If a premise is great and the title is great, the book has to be great.
It's got to be good.
not when the author hasn't given the manuscript the amount of time that it needs. This book could have been great. There's no reason it shouldn't have been great, but it wasn't great. And the author has the ability, the writing ability to make the book great. I'm not bashing the author at all for the ability to write a great book, but the time hadn't been spent yet on this particular book to make it great. And I've let that haunt me for the rest of the time. I had close friends want to publish through me, and I would always tell them this exact story I just told and said, so you're going to have to show me what you've got, and you're going to have to expect notes from me. And I'm telling you right now, if I am taking the time to give you notes and you send me back an email saying, cool story, bro, I don't want to change anything, then we're not going to have a deal. We're not going to have a deal. You don't have to do what I tell you to do, but if I send you back notes that say this needs work, here's some suggestions. If you choose to do no work, then we don't have a deal. And I've always kept that. I've always maintained that level ever since then because of the disastrous situation I put myself in. So I want to hear your thoughts as a writer. Recently, we were talking in Facebook comments about this subject, and you talked about being part of a writer group where a lot of people give you notes and feedback on your writing. I want to know how important that is to you, and at what point is enough enough? At what point have you just taken your manuscript and so many people have criticized it and so many people have given you their 2 cents on it? Because if you ask someone an opinion, they're going to fucking give it to you.
Yeah.
It's never going to stop. At what point is your story now in a blender and you've blended it up and gotten 700 different opinions, and now what comes out on the other side, who knows what it is? So how do you feel about the importance of that writer group and having these other people's opinions and critiques of your stuff, and when is enough enough?
I think it's crucial. Like, I don't know what I would do without working with this writer group, and I've come to the point where I crave feedback on my stuff. And I've been working with this particular group of writers for years now, so they understand the personality of my stories, and they offer criticism that's in line with my intentions, with what I try to do.
Isn't that what's important? That's what's key. When you're getting notes, is that it's an enhancement of what's already there, not being told like, well, this sucks.
Exactly. It has to be thoughtful criticism, and it can be, it can be harsh, but it has to be thoughtful, and it has to come from a positive place.
A place to enhance the work itself.
To enhance the work for readers. So here's the way that I look at it, and there's two facets of this. So the first thing that I think is that when I'm writing a story, it's mine. When I'm putting that, when I first have that idea, and I'm first putting that idea on paper, and it's so fucking pure, that's mine, right? Nothing can ever take that experience away from me. That's mine. I'll always have, there's stories that I've written, and I've revised, and I've revised, and I've revised, but when I think back on them, what I'm thinking back on is that first draft, where it just purely poured out of me. And that's awesome. I love that. But I also want people to read my shit, right? And so my belief is that if you're a writer who wants other people to read your shit, you need to take the steps to make certain that that vision that you had translates to what people are going to want out of a story. Put it in some way that people are going to be able to get meaning out of it and understand what you were getting at. And that's where the revision process comes in. And I feel like writers are take this all like such a sacred thing. That first draft will always be sacred. Revising it and making changes to it, that doesn't take anything away from your first draft. You've still got your pure idea. It's got, you can keep that as long as you want. But if you have something that you want to put in front of people, there's probably going to be some work that needs to be done with it. So get feedback from people you trust, and get feedback from people who understand your vision and what you try to do with your writing. So recently, I submitted a piece to an online journal that I respect quite a bit, and they gave me a lot of feedback. And it was good feedback. It was feedback that came from a really well-meaning place. But the feedback was essentially, the story is called How to Make a Butt Sweat Golem. And it's about this guy who makes the golem out of his butt sweat, right? That's a very me story. And the suggestions were, you wouldn't have to have the butt sweat. It could just be a golem. And you could take these gross things out of it, and it could just be about this guy. Well, I don't just write stories about this guy, So it's like, that was good criticism, but it didn't take into account who I am and what I'm trying to do with my writing. So you have to be mindful of criticism that is trying to insert itself into your writing, and you have to be very accepting and able to recognize criticism that understands your vision and is just trying to make it absolutely certain that your vision manifests in a way that's going to be compelling to someone who reads it, and so that there's no missed opportunities, and so that you're giving. A lot of criticism is not even just about changing it so that readers can absorb it, but it's about making certain that you as a writer are giving it your all. So I get criticism sometimes that says, you could do this whole thing here, and it's like, yeah, I could, and a doorway just opens for even more creativity of mine to pour into that story.
Maximizing the potential of the story, maximizing the potential of the author. And
absolutely.
It's really important, like you said, not to insert the criticism itself or the attitude of or the ideas of the editor into the story. So when I'm offering criticism, it's always you could do something here that will maximize the potential of this gag, of this gore, of this sex, of this. You could do something more here or more here. I never say what. I never
Okay.
tell an author what to do. I just say you could do something here. There's potential to add something here. There's a potential to take this and stretch it, or take this and try something more, elaborate it. But I don't ever try to put my own creative ideas into someone else's story. It should be a butt sweat golem. Well, in the case of a butt sweat golem, if we're going to stay on that example, what I'm saying that I don't do is I would never say, well, what if it was a butt sweat golem, but it was a purple butt sweat golem with green horns and it shit puke out of the tops of its horns. Those are creative ideas that aren't mine to add to your story. If I say, I would say something along the lines of, I love the idea of the butt sweat golem, but the golem isn't doing much. What else could the golem do that would add to the story? It's up to you what you want the golem to do to make the story more lively or vivid, but I'm never going to tell you what to put there. That's not my place as the editor or as the guy giving a critique to your story. It's never my place to insert my creative ideas into your work.
That's a good point, and I think there's a fine line. You know, there's the creativity and what you're trying to put into it, and then there's like technical storytelling components. You know what I mean? And sometimes those two lock together so tightly that, you know, in an editor's notes, it's hard to differentiate, you know, when I say, you know, you need to amp up the conflict here, and you've already got the players for the conflict. You've got all of the pieces there. They just need to be arranged slightly differently to make sure that there's conflict that can keep that reader on the edge of their seat. You know, something like that. And sometimes it does get a little bit closer to saying, you know, here's maybe what you should do. But I think it's important that the editor makes it clear that these are suggestions, that these are ideas, and the understanding is this is what needs to be accomplished. Here's a possible way of accomplishing it, and you can take that way and you can build on it, or you can, you know, go in a different direction. But ultimately, you know, if the particular issue is, you know, let's have some conflict here, or let's have more depth to this character here, or something like that, as long as that's accomplished, you know, I think it's
right. And I think it's similar, like what you're saying about locking together is like me suggesting an ending, which is none of my business. An ending isn't any business of mine to tell a writer what to do. But when they've set it up, it's their idea. It's already their idea.
Right.
But I'm saying, well, but you can bookend it and make it really neat if you add this ending to it, which you already have at the beginning. That's, like you said, it's a mechanical an issue that does interlock with the creative end, but it's always what I'm looking for when I'm giving notes is I'm always looking for the ability to lead in a direction without telling someone what to do.
Right.
And like and mechanics are important, are very specific. Like you said, conflict, or the ending needs to be stronger, crisper, something along those lines. The first line isn't strong enough, it's not compelling. Those are very specific things, but at the same time you're allowing the author the ability to be creative, the ability to tell their own story, which I think is the most important thing, is that the author never feel like they're no longer telling their story, and that an editor is now telling their story for them, because it loses it's now co-written. You now might as well put both names, written by both names. It's no longer the author's creative vision.
Right.
And I've actually seen that happen. I've actually seen books that get reissued and republished with the editor as a co-writer because they've done so much intrusive editing. That's not something that I'm comfortable with, but I think, but at least the editor got credit for the creative changes they made.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mention endings, because I think endings, especially as writers of weird fiction, are complicated, because we are naturally writers who pour out ideas. You know what I mean? Like your stories, like you just rain ideas onto the page. And then there's a question of, and this is something I have problems with too, endings are not my strongest suit, and it's one of the things that I get the most help with from my writers group. And it's the question of, when does the story end? And when is, you could be pouring ideas onto the page, and like maybe those ideas, the character continues on, but ultimately what the story was about had actually ended like two pages earlier, and you're just pouring out ideas after that. Or maybe the actual ending of the story was in this tangent that the author forgot to follow, and instead went down this other like avalanche of ideas that's super awesome, but it's not like the actual story that's been set up with these characters and this particular situation. So to some extent, it's like, pulling in, like, and one thing that I think about when I work with my writers group in endings is, and in pieces where it's like ideas coming out that aren't really a part of the story that's being told, write a different story. You know what I mean?
I've always said that. I see a lot of too many things, and it's usually full-length things, feature-length films or novel-length books where there's clearly this subplot and topic that you're dying to discuss, but you've put it in a movie about vampires with teeth on their tits. Let's keep it about the vampires with teeth on their tits. You don't have to go into this other tangent. You can write another book or another story about this thing and not have it come in here and break up the flow and rhythm of this particular topic. And that's a great note, and it's a note that I give people very often. It's, this thing is cool, but not in this story. Take it out and write. If you have a passion for this thing, then give it then give it what it deserves. Don't make it a subplot or a secondary issue or a rant in this thing. This thing is strong enough without it. Take it out and do your own thing with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that it comes from a place where the author is trying to hit a certain word count or something that, or trying to get a movie to feature length, and they just don't have enough confidence in the main subject or the main plot, and so they're trying to pad it to get length or pad it to get substance, and a lot of times that just dilutes the whole thing. While both topics are important to the author and both they're very passionate about those things, they need separated.
Absolutely, and sometimes it comes with character development too. If you've got a strong character, the character will go where the story needs to go, and you won't have to insert these other things for length. And I think it's, it comes out a lot in novels and like, Stephen King novels. There's like all of these extra things, but that's his scene. In short stories, you really don't have room to, like, in a novel, I threw some stuff in Pork Knuckles, like the Nazi fly chapter. It really has nothing to do with the story proper. And
actually, that's one of the things I was actually disappointed that didn't have more to do with the climax of the tale, because like you said, you just kind of put it in there as just like a cool thing to be in there. And at the end of it, I was like, I wish there would have been more Nazi fly shit that would have been important to the full story.
Right. And I think it's, with the style I was going for, with the, all sorts of weird stuff happening, I think it makes sense. In a short story, you can't just insert something that has nothing to do with it. Short stories are a little bit more confined.
Yeah, they definitely. The short story needs to start off running. It's a sprint. Get everything you need, and short stories, as many of us write as many short stories as we write, the tens of thousands of short stories that are out there from us weirdo writers, it's a hard thing to do. It's a hard medium to tackle. It's hard to tell something compelling in only a few pages. When I'm trying to write for 3,000 and 5,000 word markets, it's tough for me to get my whole idea out in that short amount of time, and I often find myself going ahead and letting my idea fly and hitting 6,500 words, 7,000 words, and then going in and just trying to cut the fat out of it and trying to
Yeah.
fucking break that down into just the essential component parts. It's one of the hardest things for me to do because I like my words. I
Yeah,
like my
yeah.
I like my words, and when you tell me I got to get rid of a third of them, it's tough for me to do sometimes. Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes it's clear, like, well, take that sentence out, reword this. You're redundant here, but sometimes it's like half my fucking ideas are gone.
Right.
But like you said, just write another story about
Just
those.
write another story. And I think that as you go, like you develop an instinct about this is a short story, this is a novella, this is a novel, this is a flash fiction piece, and you'll always run into this thing where it's like, oh, I thought this was going to be a flash fiction piece, and somehow it has just turned into a novella. And
I had trouble with that for a while. Some of my Robama Apocalypse was supposed to be a short story.
Yeah,
What else? There's several things that I wrote that were supposed to be Cotton Candy, my first story in Strange Sex. That ended up being like 17,500 words long. It was supposed to be,
yeah.
I think the cutoff was like 8,000. So I went over twice the length of what I told everybody else they had to stop at.
Right.
And I actually have spent the last 6 months or so really working hard on short stories to get them down. I've been trying to get flash pieces done under 1,200 words, and I've been trying to do a lot of 3,000 to 5,000 word stories because it's tough, man. It's hard. Some people make it look really easy and do a shit ton of them in their careers.
Right.
For me, hitting those things really short is tough for me. It's tougher for me to write the short stuff than it is for me to write longer stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe because I started off with the longer stuff. I started off writing feature film scripts, so I was able to really do a lot of characters, a lot of different points of view, a lot of scenes, a lot of different scenes. Wouldn't it be cool? Wouldn't it be cool? Wouldn't it be cool?
Right.
Short
You're
stories.
used to being able to throw in every idea that you had and making it work, which is tougher to do in a short story.
Really tough, and I struggled with it for a while, but I'm getting better at it. Yeah. So at what point is your story done? At what point have enough cooks come in and thrown their spices at you that you're finally happy with what you got? And when do you start? When do you say, okay, guys, thank you, we're done here? At what point do you call it a day and stop taking notes?
I'm kind of arbitrary about it. So what I do is I do my first draft where it's just all like, my ideas spewed onto the page, set it aside for a bit, come back to it, do my second draft. My second draft will go to my writing group, and I'll get their ideas. I'll take their ideas. I usually find that I end up using 80 to 90% of the criticism that I'm given in my group. And then I write a third draft and clean it up. And third draft is usually when I consider that my final draft.
You don't send it back. You don't send it back into the fucking trenches to get shot at again.
No, that's it. And then I start sending it out. Sometimes, I'll come back to a story like years later and do a fourth draft or something, but for the most part, that third draft. And like, I say third draft, but it's kind of mushy because like in each of my drafts, I do several drafts. So it ends up being more like 9 drafts because there's kind of like a mini rewrite for each version, but it's basically 3 drafts.
How many did Dungeons and Drag Queens go through?
That went through a lot of drafts actually, because I did 3. I did 3 drafts of it, and then I sent it to Kevin, and Kevin gave me some notes. I did a bunch of rework based on his notes. I sent him another draft.
Was it extensive? Was that first set of notes that he sent, that it really changed the direction of the book? Did it take a lot of effort to kind of get his vision and your vision aligned, or was it just some enhancements here and there?
It was pretty heavy lifting because one of the things was he wanted me to beef it up. So I think I added like 6,000 words to the original draft, which was a lot. And I think I took out a whole chapter too. I can't remember if that was before it got to Kevin or after, but there's a substantial amount of rework for that, but mainly in terms of addition. He thought that I could add more to it.
Addition is good. It's when subtraction or weird shit like this character shouldn't be this is an extra character that doesn't really do the story justice. Fuck am I supposed to handle that? Like, I get anxiety from notes, man, because my initial reaction is always, well, it's the fucking story I wanted to write and I wrote it. And then I read the notes and my first reaction is always, who the fuck do you think you are? And then I relax and I only take notes from people that I respect.
Yeah.
People whose writing I love anyway. So I always know it comes from a good place, and it comes from a place of weirdo writers that write in line with my vision anyway. So I'm never going to have to do a David Foster Wallace rant response to someone.
Right, exactly.
We're all on the same team. So then I relax, and I read the notes again, and I'm like, these are good notes. But I'm always from that. I always come at it initially from that place of, well, how the fuck am I supposed to change anything? Because my stuff is always. I always envision my story like Tetris blocks or like a puzzle. Whereas I'm writing it, I'm trying to fit these pieces in together as tight as possible where they work. And I consider a story finished after I've done enough drafts of it that all those pieces interlock and form exactly the story that I want to tell. Taking notes requires me to pull that apart and rework the fucking parts. Now, great notes only require me to enhance the puzzle that's already there. Notes that frustrate me are notes that require me to pull the story apart and throw pieces away and try to get. Now it's a fucking puzzle that looks like this. How the fuck is this supposed to go together? And those really frustrate me. But a lot of times they're necessary because as an author, just because what you're looking at you think is the finished story doesn't ever mean it is. It like you said, it almost always requires another set of eyes and taking notes from someone or multiple people that have your best intentions in mind, that are on your team, they're on your side. And so even if you have to pull the damn thing apart and rework it, it's for the best. It's all to make the story more accessible to readers. More exciting.
And not even that, but just just maximizing the story, really. Is what it is about.
The best, giving your chili the best pop it can possibly. It's
exactly
the good chili, but it could be a great chili.
Exactly, and I think it's good for writers. I personally love that revision. I love taking it apart and putting it back together. Like my revisions is like I scrap shit, I tear it apart, I add stuff. I love that. I've gotten to really love that part of it as like a completely different exercise than the initial draft where all my ideas were just flowing freely. And I think it's good for writers to learn to love that because it's like I wrote an essay on my blog where I kind of compared it to like improvising in a jazz song. So a jazz song is composed in a certain way, right? And there are certain things that can be played. So that's your first draft, right? You composed it, and now you can go over it and you can improvise. You can take parts where it's like, that's boring, I'm gonna pull that out and do this crazy thing here. And there's a lot of fun to be had with revision too, and it can really, I don't know. I think it's good to learn to enjoy that.
I probably had 16,000 words on the initial draft of Vampire Guts in Nuketown. It wasn't called Vampire Guts in Nuketown. It was called Fang Road, and it was the most boring vampire story in the history of boring vampire stories. And in my rewrite of it, I was just learning what Bizarro was, and I've talked a lot on this show about how I wrote Bizarro movies and I made Bizarro movies before I knew what it was. But when I switched to fiction, I got real shy and real coy about what was possible with fiction and what audience there was out there for weird shit. So I really dialed back my style as a fiction writer at first. And Vampire Guts in Nuketown, originally Fang Road, was one of the first things I wrote that was really lukewarm and really tepid, and just me trying to get my my bearings on what this whole fiction writer thing was going to be.
Sure.
And I put it in a drawer, and I didn't even type it up. I just had it written in a notebook, like 2.5 notebooks, I think. And really got into Bizarro, really started reading it, wrote Robot Apocalypse, really had fun with that, had fun with like really getting crazy ideas out there, knowing that there was an audience for it, and knowing that there was a genre of fiction that would accept it. And then I got Fang Road out of the drawer and absolutely demolished it, and just added so much weird shit to it, and really turned it into the novel that it turned out to be. By doing exactly what you said, these revisions where I had the plot never changed. The plot was exactly the same as Fang Road, but I just made it weird and wild and added just the most bizarre shit I could think of to what was already there. Like you're saying, like a jazz improvisation where here's the standard, it's already there, but what can I do to really spice this thing up? And that it definitely would have been a shitty book if I hadn't done that.
Yeah. It's a party. It's a party.
I think we just managed to do like an hour and a half of bullshit talking about movies and comic books and nonsense, and shifted into like an hour and a half of some of the most hardcore, like writing-centric conversations I've ever had in my whole life. So thank you very much, MP Johnson. You're a fucking fantastic writer. You're one of my favorite Bizarros out there in the world. I consider you a good friend, and I'm happy to spend any time I can with you. Can't wait to get together in 2 weeks for Bizarro Hour at what is it, G-Mart Comics?
G-Mart Comics.
On Saturday the 28th, and that's in downtown Chicago. We're going to do a live broadcast on the internet to watch some of the coolest, I think the most creative writers in Bizarro get down and do some live readings, some performance art, I'm sure. It's just going to be a fun, fantastic hour, 2 hours. Be sure to tune in for that. Be sure to subscribe to my newsletter on kevinthestrange.com to get brand new stories, never before seen stories from me every single month right here on kevinthestrange.com. Plug some shit. MP Johnson, tell us where we can find you.
All right, freaktension.com is your one-stop MP Johnson shop. We've got next book, Cattle Cult Kill Kill, coming in the next couple of months from Strange House Books. Then we got Sick Pack, S-I-C-K Pack, Sick Pack, coming out from Bizarro Pulp Press in July, August-ish. Then toward the fall, Eraserhead Press is putting out the follow-up to Dungeons and Drag Queens. Still working on a title for that sucker. Yeah, lots of books, lots of fun. Got the G.G. Allen anthology coming up too, and there's 2 weeks left to submit to that one.
Yeah, I started writing my story for that.
Looking forward to a Kevin Strange story for that one.
Yeah, I started writing it yesterday. I got a good flow on it. Got 1,100 words slapped down. It's called "There's a Little G.G. in All of Us."
Beautiful.
And I can't wait to get that to you. Get your thoughts, get your notes on it. Hopefully, it it is what it is. If it makes it, it makes it. If it doesn't, I'm still eating that book with you at BizarroCon.
Awesome.
I'm so excited, too, that that's the regular cover, and there's still a crazy cover out there that we don't have yet. I'll definitely be ordering a copy of that from the Kickstarter. When is that coming? When is the Kickstarter coming for the G.G. Allen book?
Kickstarter's coming in April. Going to be lots of awesome rewards, and the Kickstarter's going to be pretty much your only location to get the Too Sick for Amazon limited edition cover.
Fantastic. And we'll be able to keep up with that on freaktension.com?
Freaktension.com, and freaktension.com links out to my Facebook and all that bullshit, so you can follow me around on the internet.
All right. I'm going to finish watching Body Melt and watch The Howling 3, The Marsupials when I finish that. So
that's good. That's like an Aussie horror double feature.
Yes, it is. Yes. And throw Dead Alive in there, or what is the zombie alien movie with the...
Bad Taste.
No. It came out in the late '90s. It's got it's got aliens and zombies specifically, but it's a what do you call them? I think the name of what is the Undead? Is that the name of the fucking movie?
That has aliens in it?
I'm pretty sure it turns out that aliens created the zombies. It's an Australian horror movie. Is it called The Undead?
Yeah, that sounds right.
The Undead movie. Well, no, that's from 2013 and 1957. Australian zombie movies. Undead. It is called Undead. It's just not called The Undead. A quaint Australian fishing village is overcome by meteorites that turn its residents into the ravenous undead, leaving a small group of those unarmed to find a way out. And it's fucking weird. You could throw that in there as a triple feature, or you could do a whole night of weird B-movie Australian flicks, because there's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Have you seen Wormwood, the new zombie movie that uses like zombie burps as fuel or whatever?
Yeah, I saw that. That was fun.
Is it good?
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
I feel like I didn't love it as much as I wanted to love it.
Rocco said, "This interview is done, dude.
It's done. It's done. You guys are just talking about bullshit now. What the hell?
We're back to bullshitting. All right, Hippie Johnson, it's been a fucking pleasure, my friend.
Hell yeah.
Love talking to you.
Good talking to you, Kevin Strange.
We'll have you back on again to talk about your new books and lots of movie talk and comic book talk, obviously.
Awesome.
And in the meantime, we're going to strange the world, right?
Strange the world.
Strange the world.
World the strange. World the strange.
Strange
the world. Strange the world. Strange the world. Strange the world. Strange the world. Strange the world. Strange the world.
All right, MP Johnson, we're out of here.
Awesome.
Check us out. We already plugged everything. Bye.